Hey guys, my name's Khadroth, and today I'm going to be talking to you guys about the upcoming 2026 banner review. If you guys have never watched one of these videos, I basically, instead of telling you guys which units are like the best units to roll for, kind of like everybody else does, I instead try to kind of go over all of the new upcoming units that you guys should consider. In the past, I used to do every single banner of the year, but frankly, in the past couple of years here, especially on the JP side of things, the number of banners per year has ballooned like exponentially. So it becomes a little bit time prohibitive. Nobody wants to sit through a 5-hour video of a bunch of like rerun banners and things. So we focus primarily now on the new stuff and the new things that you guys need to consider. So there will be things that you guys will see. I'll talk about them as we go through the schedule of the year. We're going to go through the entire year. We're going to talk about all the upcoming units and even some of the additional considerations, things that you guys might want to be kind of looking forward towards and considering as we move throughout the year. Things like the evocation festivals and the availability of units, things like the SSR selector ticket that we're going to get later this year, things like the GSSRs and basically the fact that they're going to be doubled up next New Year's. So definitely things that you guys are going to want to like keep tabs on and make sure that you guys have in the consideration for your role plans, because that's ultimately what this is about, is trying to come up with a setup, a plan for you guys to actually like be able to implement as to who you want to target and how you want to go about doing it. And the reason why is going to be because, again, we're getting more and more banners in the game. There's more and more units vying for your, hard-earned currency. We really want to make sure that you guys are getting the most out of it. And I'm not going to try to make too many, statements with, absolutes and saying, oh, you gotta roll this character. You need to, pay attention here. I'm just going to try to instead say hey, you should try to give consideration to each of the units on this list. I'm going to try to make the case for them and also try to tell you what they're good at, maybe what they're bad at, what they struggle at, how they've performed the past couple years on JP from my eyes as somebody that's been playing on the server. So that'll give you guys a little bit of an idea of what to expect here. We're going to go ahead and start kind of towards the beginning. Now, admittedly, already here in January, this is JP's schedule that we're showing from 2 years ago, but we know for NA that there will be pretty much a similar effect. The one change that we obviously can account for early on is going to be the fact that the anniversary for the NA server happens at a different time. Ours should happen approximately a month ahead of where it does for JP. That means there's a little bit of a schedule shift that needs to occur per ancient dev statements as to the sort of condition of anniversary and who will appear on GSSRs. So we know that any new unit that was out on JP at the time of the GSSR and anniversary also has to be available for NA for their anniversary GSSR as well. So that means some events will move forward, and that does create a little bit of a forward push and crunch on the schedule. So now that we've seen that, we can kind of talk about it. But the only real consideration, because we're going to kind of skip over some of the stuff that we've already kind of been doing. We're currently, as of me recording this, in the midst of the Samurai Remnant campaign, basically the Waxing Moon event. So you guys already kind of know what the deal is with those units. I'm not going to waste too much time talking about it, other than to denote that the Waxing Moon event actually did come about a week earlier on NA, and the reason being, again, is that mid-year kind of push forward as we talked about for anniversary. So if you're gonna denote some of the dates here, keep in mind that some of them are going to be a little bit earlier than they're otherwise indicated. So that's your big takeaway from what I'm saying there. Now, obviously, we're going to have other considerations, things like the 3100 days anniversary. We're going to keep getting milestone anniversaries throughout as we go through this video. You're not going to have to worry about them too much. They usually are just going to be a sign that you're going to get more quartz whenever you hit those milestones. So it is what it is, but it's not something that you really need to plan too much around unless you're being meticulous with how you're plotting out your currency. And if you want to do that, there are numerous tools to help you guys tabulate everything that you can possibly earn. Now, a big one I do want to talk about right here at the end of January is one that we're probably not going to receive on NA, and the reason being is that we've already received it. If you guys will remember, the Stay Night 20th Anniversary Commemoration Campaign did give a summoning campaign and also a servant selector for one of the Fate Stay Night units, but NA has already had this, so you guys are not going to get another crack at that, unfortunately. So keep in mind, while it does appear on the JP list here, NA got it early, so unfortunately you've already missed this one. Coming into February and starting at the bottom, we can see pretty much the first thing that we really need to talk about here, and that's going to be the Evocation Festival Part 7. Remember, I talked about this in the beginning that there were some considerations. Evocation festivals are going to be one of them. You guys can see the available units that are going to be in this Evocation batch. This is going to be, again, on NA, it's called the Pilgrimage Festival, so don't get confused about the naming there. But basically, this is going to be the return of old welfare units. And the reason why I'm going to point this out to you guys is obviously you want to have enough Evocation leaves to be able to purchase all of the copies, all of the essential materials for these units. But you're also going to want to make sure that you're paying attention to what units specifically are available and maybe triaging them if you don't have enough, because some of these units can be very lucrative for your account. They can actually help basically buttress you going forward and shore up your account in a way that it will allow you to have another option for some of these classes. Like, for instance, Altera the Sunta can be a pretty decent single target archer for you with some charge capability. Same thing there with Karna Saber. He's a pretty solid single target in his own right. And we do have two AoEs right there in the two Saber faces. So definitely an interesting one to be sure. But keep in mind as well, if you're also a huge fan of these, that usually during these time periods, you will have a 2 times efficiency in terms of experience gain when leveling up, and this can be a really good time if you're going to level any of these units, not only to get them done and worked on if you're just trying to get them leveled, but also if you plan to like grail one of them, you're going to get extra efficiency here, as well as the 2 times great and super success chance for all servants during this, and the half cost for QP for leveling them. So a lot of benefit to getting some work done during the Evocation Festival. And that's an important thing for us coming off the back end of a lotto, and again, with considerations as to like, hey, do I need to roll that single target archer this year when I'm going to potentially be able to get one as a welfare? So that's, again, why I will point this sort of thing out. We will start to have the Ordeal Call campaigns again. Ordeal Call Part 2 will be coming pretty early in the year, especially with that forward shift, but we'll get to that in a bit. And then we'll have the Valentine's pre-release campaign. The big thing to understand about Valentine's is always going to be the fact that it is a female-centric event. What does that mean? Well, if we go look at the summoning campaign, obviously Andromeda is going to be our new unit, but you can see there are a horde of other permanent and story locked units available for you guys here that will be in the pool. You will not be able to roll male units, and in case you do spy like an Enkidu or something like that in there, keep in mind that gender neutral works for both this and the Chaldea Boys event later. That is the male equivalent. So you can find them, but otherwise it is an entirely female-centric event. And whenever you guys do roll on the individual banners, that's usually the only units that can show up. So while you could be, say, rolling for Lartoria, you might actually be able to get spooked by San Zhang because she's just in that general pool. But who you won't get spooked by is Waver or someone like that, because males won't be available to spook you if you're rolling on one of those banners. Now, talking about Andromeda here, she's a very interesting unit. As you guys can see, she is an AoE quick rider. I do find the design for her to be really cool, but I'm honestly going to say that Andromeda at this point could probably use a little bit of attention on the JP side of things. She really doesn't have too much in the terms of like raw firepower and strength. She does have some additional charge if she's near waterside battlefield, and she does have the ability to skill seal enemies with her NP. but she's not going to be your strongest looper. She is somebody that you can make loop, but you are going to be a little bit dependent on the number of enemies in the node, and you are going to be a little bit dependent on the supports that you have to be able to bring with Andromeda to get the most out of her. If you don't feel like you're a very quick-centric account, as attractive as Andromeda may be to you, I can recommend at least skipping for maybe a more welfare alternative. That being said, she's also, again, not a bad unit if you do want to go after her. Just keep in mind considerations for other units that you will be rolling for later this year. Andromeda is a limited unit, as are most of the new units that are going to come out this year. There's very few story locked or permanent units available. I'll talk about them each when they do come available. Now, obviously, again, some of these other units are older units. I'm not going to take the time to go over them. I have videos on most, if not all of them, and you guys could definitely check that out. But again, they are known quantities in the FGO sphere of things. We really don't have to talk too much about it. There will obviously be craft essences for Valentine's Day. If you want a little bit of a like PSA life hack type deal here, the one thing I can tell you guys, whenever you get into a Valentine's event, especially if you don't plan to roll right away or not at all, I recommend saving at least 5 copies of the CE, because again, all the CEs have the same effect. There's just a unique one for each servant, but save at least 5 of them and kind of store them away in your second archive or something, so that when Valentine's rolls around again the next year, you can pull them out, because Valentine's is almost always a point-based event, and usually these CEs will give you a baseline of like, say, 10% extra point gain. So if you haven't rolled any CEs, this is an easy way to kind of get an early like bump in the event and help you out with scaling the ladder until you either do roll, or if you never do roll again, it's just a supplement for you. But that's my easy kind of cheat going from year to year, as Valentine's always seems to have this characteristic. Otherwise, if you don't care about the CEs, if it's not for a unit that you necessarily want to like keep the CE for, feel free to feed them into a craft essence bomb. I know that sounds atrocious if you're a big fan of the lore and the characters, but in terms of actual gameplay efficiency, they're worth quite a bit of experience. So I highly recommend taking them, because you'll get them back and you'll be able to acquire every single one of them every year. So I highly recommend just going ahead, feeding them to a CE bomb, and then, you know, from there, kind of just going with the flow and using it to level up a CE that you actually care about, something that'll actually help you out in terms of the event. Now, there are also return gifts that will be centered around the male version. Even though we do have the Chaldea Boys event, this is where a lot of the Valentine's exchanging actually occurs. This Chaldea Boys is usually a much more dumbed down event in that regard. So, after that, we have the Sovereign's Memoir pre-release campaign. This is going to be, again, your pre-release campaign for Ordeal Call Part 2. So you guys can see before that, though, while that's all going on, we should probably early March, or even maybe as early as late February, start getting the Chaldea Boys collection stuff, including the Charlemagne event. Unfortunately, there is, relatively speaking, no new unit here. The big thing that I'm going to talk about with you guys as we go to look at this, we're going to go into the summoning campaigns and take a quick gander, as one of the big things in any Chaldea Boys event is how are the craft essences. Now, we're only going to focus primarily on the 2 5-star CEs here, basically BRD and Capricious. BRD at MLB is going to ignore invincibility. It's going to have all attack scaling. And it's going to give quick and buster performance by 8% each, which is certainly not a bad one if you have a unit that specializes in both those card types. And Capricious is also all attack scaling. At MLB, it will allow you to ignore defense and increase Ars performance by 10%, NP damage by 20%. Some of you guys might not get MLB of the CE because you're not going to roll the banners. That's perfectly fine. Honest to God, though, I think I do recommend Capricious over anything else, because it can be difficult to get an ignore defense CE out there in the game. And this one, even if it's non-MLB, still has pretty decent effects, as it's functionally going to be the equivalent of a like Ocean Flyer or something like that. Just you're trading out the 50% charge for defense ignore. So those are the considerations I would tell you there. Again, if you really want a taunt CE in this game and you can't seem to find a banner to get one, there is the ability on NA to go back and do the 2017, actually I believe it's the 2019 version on NA, the one that has the Outrage CE in it. You can go into your rare prism shop. I believe it costs 3 rare prisms. You can unlock the 2019 Chaldea Boys Exchange if you haven't already done it before. Get that in there, choose Outrage, and that is a free, assuming you don't care about the rare prisms, taunt C for you that you won't have to gacha for. So that's another tip for you guys there. Then from there, we're going to get the ID chapter released, and this is going to be Ordeal Call 2. This is going to be a little bit of a big one here for us, but it's going to bring in our first story-locked unit of the year in Marie Antoinette Alter. Now, Marie Alter is a very interesting one. This should be happening again late March, but again, it'll probably be a little bit earlier, maybe mid-March or maybe even early March, depending on how much the shift occurs for NA. But Marie Antoinette, as we already mentioned, she's story locked. She is an AoE Arts Avenger, and what she lacks in damage output, she more than makes up for in consistency and challenge applicability. So you guys can see she does have charge. She has NP regen per turn. She has the ability to increase her own damage against enemies that have curse status, which also means you can double this up with curse command codes. It means you can definitely slot in CEs for her that boost damage against cursed enemies, and you can get a lot of ability there, as well as the 3-turn arcs up. And then self-invincibility, just like her rider form of 3 attacks, 3 turns, as well as granting the party guts except herself and healing, does make her a pretty nice support and pairing alongside, like, let's say the Castorias, as that's going to give them a little bit of an out should something have the ability to get through solid defense, or again, just be kind of slowly chipping away at them. The Marie Antoinette can work not only as a little bit of a lesser damage farmer with good regen, but also as a little bit of a challenge unit that can help keep your supports alive. I do feel like in terms of overall viability, she hasn't been super strong as the years have gone by on JP, but she is still pretty quality, and I do think a lot of people like the design, so I'm not going to blame anybody for rolling for her. I myself will probably try to at least pick up a copy or two. And you guys can see she has the ability to inflict curse with her Noble Phantasm, then apply the evil curse status that's going to boost it, and then also drain the gauge and have a 60% chance to instant kill. All of that's fantastic. That's exactly what you like to see. It's great for challenge content, as it does mean that you can chip away at enemies as well as drain them and deprive them of their NP. And given the fact that she is AoE, this is really strong for her to be able to deprive an entire enemy wave of being able to retaliate. So again, I do really like Marie in that regard. I think she's kind of one of those sneaky good units that a lot of people will either just roll anyways because they like the designs that she has, or they're gonna end up kind of ignoring her, thinking that she just doesn't do enough firepower, and kind of miss out on a little bit of a hidden gem for challenge purposes. Now, next up here, we have Hassan of the Shining Star. He is our 4-star, and he is permanent. Taking a look at him just right off the bat, the big thing you guys need to know is he is a 6-hit AoE Arts NP. So he is kind of like a 4-star variant of almost 100 Faces in that regard. And you can see he does get super effective damage against man attribute, as well as an overcharge effect that boosts his arts and quick performance. He also is one of the few that's going to actually interact with the Darkness battlefield. When it came out, it is functionally a new battlefield type for him. We have seen a couple other interactions with it, but not too much still yet. Still an interesting thing in that regard. He does have multi-turn steroids. He does have multi-time evasion. So he's at least pretty serviceable for a 4-star unit. Though admittedly, he is a little bit disjointed with him being an arts unit, but getting NP gauge when attacking with quick cards. It feels like they're trying to lean into the triple quick deck. I'm not really sure why they wanted to go with that too hard, other than to make him a little bit more of the stereotypical assassin. Again, I have a video on him detailing how to properly use him and get the most out of him. And you can see at least the triple quick cards that he has are 6-hit. I do think he's, again, serviceable he is certainly a newer unit, and that does at least bear some consideration as to like why he hasn't gotten a lot of upgrades or things like that. But at the end of the day, most of you guys should have very capable options for your assassins, particularly if you can hold out on a 4-star AoE assassin. You're going to get a much better one at the start of the next year compared to Hassan of the Shining Star. But again, if you like him and you like his JoJo-esque design there, feel free to go after him. He is on a already relatively lucrative pairing here with Marie Antoinette. Your second campaign is going to be Jalter. The only reason I'm going to bring this up is because this is actually when Jalter is going to get her 50% charge update. So that will be a huge buff for her. But I'm going to caution you guys against splurging on her unless you're a big Jalter fan for one other reason. Summoning Campaign 3 will include Tyra and Marie Antoinette Ryder. And Summoning Campaign 4 will include the Count of Monte Cristo, our next unit, as a limited single target quick Avenger. So unlike his other form, basically Dante's is not going to be AoE here. He's instead going to be single target, and he's going to focus a lot more on just sheer obliteration of his foes. As you guys can see, he gets the multi-turn Quicken Buster up, 2 times invincibility for 3 turns, basically gets the ability to debuff on attack to inflict burn. He's also going to grant himself poison and debuff immunity for 3 turns. And from there, his third skill is a 50% charge and 50% crit damage. If that was not enough, he also gets, again, fairly good absorption that'll help him out as an Avenger to be able to kind of soak stars. And his Noble Phantasm is a 10-hit single target quick NP that's going to ignore invincibility for 1 turn, have a 500% chance to stun them, and then deal damage, and then it will deal super effective scaling damage based off the stacks of burn on the enemy. So this isn't even just, oh, you need burn on the enemy. No, it's how many burns can we stack and how much can I get out of that? So yeah, honestly, the Count of Monte Cristo here, his new form, King of the Cavern, is just ridiculously strong. It's something that a lot of you guys should be paying attention to. Again, apologies to the Jalter fans out there, but if you're not the biggest Jalter fan, holding off for at least like a week or so there and waiting for the Count to get his banner is probably your better play, assuming you have these supports to actually support him. Because he can functionally do a lot of the same stuff that Jalter can do. Instead of buff blocking, though, he's just going to stun their ass. So they're not really going to get a turn unless they manage to have like debuff or stun immunity somehow. So you guys can see he's very capable at just kind of slicing up bosses and not really giving them much of an opportunity to do anything back. Though again, there are a fair amount of bosses that actually do have like debuff immunity. And if that's the case, just be careful because again, well, he won't be a sitting duck. He will not be able to count on that stun to be able to protect him as much as he already is. Still, again, I do feel like King of the Cavern here is a really powerful unit upcoming this year. He's one that I think a lot of people will underestimate the amount of damage he does. He is up there on the charts, so it's definitely one that a lot of you guys will probably like once you get your hands on him. I'm not going to say you have to build him into your role plans. I'm just going to say pay attention to him, maybe consider him, maybe set aside some funds if you feel like he's somebody that you would like and you need that single target Avenger. Now, next up here, we have another story locked unit. This is going to be our 4-star, and it's going to be a Pretender, Alessandro de Cagliostro. Cagliostro is a really interesting unit. He does have some very niche uses, but he also has a little bit of a clunky kit. You guys can see he's a rare triple arts unit in the current stage of the game. The devs tried to get away from triple arts because I think on one hand, for carding purposes, it's not the strongest, but on the other hand, for getting back to a Noble Phantasm and pairing with art supports, it is just really strong. So you guys can see he has the ability to charge his own gauge by 50% and again, grant himself 30% NP damage up. He has a self-gut status for 1 time 5 turns that whenever his guts is activated will charge his own NP gauge by 30% and increases his NP gen rate for 5 turns by 30%. On top of that, and actually I should definitely mention this, that if you do lure the skill, well, it has a 10-turn cooldown. It also has a 10,000 HP amount from the guts. I don't even want to think about what this would do paired with Logress. Dear Lord. But the third skill here is going to be an increase to his own arts performance and critical damage for 3 turns. It's really going to help him out in that regard because he's going to need that extra arts up really to be successful. And we can see as we move on, he's going to have a 4-hit, basically AoE arts NP. That's going to remove all enemies' defensive buffs activating first. So Cagliostro are going to be a sneaky good unit for challenge stuff. Again, if you're taking them into like story content, as long as they don't have the silver box around their like defensive buff, he's going to remove it. He's going to be able to remove anything that's not bolted down, essentially, that is a defensive buff. What this does not include is Guts, just so you guys remember. Guts is considered to be a restorative buff, not a defensive buff, but it will remove anything like Solemn Defense, Invincibility, or Evasion, as well as just straight up defense and other variants of it. So it's a very, very strong effect to have, especially with it going out before damage output hits the target, as that's going to make it very difficult for anybody to stop Cagliostro from dealing damage to them. From there, he'll reduce defense and again deal super effective damage to lawful alignment people, so he does have a little bit of a niche there. Again, you do also have Janako that has the anti-lawful niche built in as another arts unit, so you can get a little bit of a nasty pairing there in that regard. So Cagliostro, again, a little bit of a clunky unit, but still fairly solid for him being what he is. Just keep in mind, he is story locked, so you won't be able to get him until after you've beaten it, but also at the same time, it's only going to be available otherwise unless you roll this first banner. So that's just going to be a difficult one for people. If they're going to roll for Monte Cristo, they're going to get him, but if they don't, they're probably not going to see him for a hot second. Now, I should be mentioning that we do at least have a new form of the ye old poison pill CE here, and the one who failed to attain immortality. It's the Zokin CE from before, except it's a new variant of it. This one still scales to 2400 attack power, but now when you die with this equip, it's going to have a 200% chance to skill seal the enemy of the unit that actually killed him off for 2 turns. So instead of the other version being NP seal, this one's going to be skill seal. There may be some niche applications of that. And we'll have a 200% chance to inflict curse with 1000 damage to them. You could use this to set up somebody else that, for instance, scales off of curse damage. But it is an interesting CE nonetheless. I'm not going to say it's one that you guys have to like run out and get, but it's something that I felt like I should mention, because while it's not on rate up in any of these banners, it does become available with its release. So we will have the Spring Master Aid campaigns at this point. Nothing too much to write home about in that sort of regard. Obviously, you guys can see just some quartz, some tickets. We'll see whether or not NA gets these sorts of things, and a new like reward craft essence, as well as some additional campaigns available for you, including Start Dash. Don't be caught looking at these going like, oh my god, I'm gonna get all that stuff for myself. Not if you're already playing. There will be summoning campaigns. I would be remiss if I didn't mention the fact that this is the return of Castoria yet again. So for those of you guys that are newer players trying to like find a good opportunity to pick up some of these supports, well, I did tell you guys I'm not going to go over older units. I felt like I should at least mention kind of the game's most meta support caster at this point being available there. And as we tread into April here, we can see that we get Evocation Festival Part 8. Now, this is going to be another interesting one, and to me, this one's a little bit better, I would argue, than the prior one, for a couple of reasons. One, we have 2 single target Lancers here, both of which are pretty serviceable. You, again, have Consort U Lancer, who's anti-man. You have, what's her face? Nagao Kagatora, sorry, I could not remember her name all of a sudden. Basically the younger form of Weiseki Kenshin, that she is going to be a fairly serviceable single target Arts Lancer that can actually do some looping power for you, and she will get her buff here. So again, if you're looking at alternatives and you feel like you're really needy in that single target Lancer department, this Evocation Festival here at the beginning of April, or again, maybe even late March on NA, is going to be a really, really valuable one for you guys to be able to kind of fill that hole. On top of that, you will have a summoning banner for Melt and a bunch of other units here. But the big one to me, the big takeaway is actually going to be BB's availability. For those of you guys that just need a Moon Cancer, having BB come back as a permanently available unit where you can now also get your servant coins for her. Yes, that's right, because while BB has been available via the main interlude sections, you haven't been able to get servant coins for her before. So that will be a consideration for a lot of people that are trying to make their BB stronger and kit her out either with some appends or trying to 120 her for a potential Grand or Grail target there. Either way, I think this Evocation Festival is going to be pretty darn solid. And you guys can see there will obviously be some interesting seas on Raid Up, including our Conquest of the Ocean of the Stars, which is altogether a little bit of a disjointed sea, but not bad. As well as Midsummer Moment, that could be a pretty interesting challenge one. And let's see, Rivalry of the Local Warlords there is also not a bad one, as it's 50% gauge at MLB. You have quite a bit of capability, and then Innocent Blue, split stats, but not bad altogether. So it's kind of some older, like, Chaldea Boys and Summer Seas there. So with that, you're going to have Ordeal Call Campaign Part 6. Again, whenever we see these are basically just going to be things that are going to start bringing in quality of life. It's going to start bringing in new nodes to the Bleached Earth. And obviously summoning campaigns with it. The reason I'm pulling it up, you guys can see again, there's Lady Avalon. So for those of you guys, again, that have maybe followed like the new player guide or any of the videos that I put out starting the new player account, you pretty much have a nice window here, March to April, to be able to roll Castoria and Lady Avalon and get an art setup already up and going for your account really quickly, assuming you can manage to snag both of them. We have the Witch on the Holy Night pre-release collaboration, kind of showing this one off. This is going to be the return of some older units, particularly Ilya and all that. But I'm going to say I would abstain from rolling on anything like that because Witch on the Holy Night, aka the Kamano Hot Springs Killer Case, this is the Witch on the Holy Night collab event. This one's going to be good. There's going to be a lot to pay attention to here, because there is obviously going to be some nice game updates. So you can actually see, you'll get Noble Phantasm forms can now be viewed in the servant details screen because Aoko actually has the capability to change. You're going to get some strengthening quests here for Fujino and basically, oh my god, Calamity Jane. Sorry, so many servants in a row, my brain starts shutting down. But both these are going to be actually really, really nice ones. Again, the charge going to Fujino and the additional stars basically really helping her out in both of those upgrades there. As we look at the summoning campaigns for this, you're going to start out with Aozaki Aoko. And Aoko, for those of you guys who know, obviously a lot of you guys are just going to roll her based off name alone, based off Nasu-verse considerations, because you're already familiar with her from Witch on the Holy Night. I'm not going to blame anyone for that, but I have to be a little bit harsh here because Aoko has some interesting capabilities. She's basically going to be our first servant entering the game that actually has AoE attacks. The problem here is that the way that they have set her up is fairly disjointed. Honestly, I could see them buffing Aoko in a weird way because the way she kind of is set up to work, she works actually pretty similar to Paladin Mash, for those of you guys who are aware, where she kind of has to get off a Noble Phantasm first, and then she moves into her actual damage dealing form. The issue here is with Paladin Mash, she has the damage output and the utility to kind of make up for it. Aoko has some of that, but I'd say that Mash is more like the perfected form of what that should be, whereas Aoko is more of a, like, I hate to say this, but an improvement on basically an older model type for a unit, aka Jekyll and Hyde. Jekyll and Hyde has a major problem in their kit, and the fact that like everything's kind of better in the Berserker form, and they don't really get anything out of getting a Noble Phantasm in the Berserker form. Aoko doesn't have either of those problems, but the issue is that you do want to rush to get her to that second form as fast as possible. And so you can see there are differences between both normal form Aoko, aka the support Aoko, and super Aoko, aka the damage dealing one, particularly her Buster and extra attacks being AoE. So whenever you use those cards, it will deal AoE damage. The interesting thing to denote is that her fourth card in the deck in the super form is Arts, in the normal form is Buster. So it's going to change from Buster to Arts. You need to be careful with that if you have it set up to have her Noble Phantasm, changing her into the super Aoko form, and then queue up cards afterwards thinking, oh, I'm going to get two AoE attacks there. And it's like, no, you're not going to necessarily. So this was something that they kind of addressed later on and actually included some quality of life to make that a little bit easier to detect. We'll see. That might actually come out with her launch on NA so that they don't have that time. But she's a really complex unit. I'm going to say if you want to know more about Aoko, please go watch my video. There's some interesting mechanics at play here, especially with the magic bullet stuff, as even the game's damage caps and stat caps have an exception for Aoko. That's why I'm going to try not to cover too much of her right here on this video, and I'm going to instead say, go watch my servant analysis on her, and you'll get a better idea about how she works. As for how she's held up over the years, I think a lot of people, I've seen very mixed viewpoints on her. Everyone was really gung-ho for her when she first came out. Some people feel like she just was not worth it, and they've never really used her since the event that she came out in. Other people feel like she's still a really unique and really fun unit, and that they have seen times that she's been really useful with certain comps. So it really just depends on your viewpoint. She's a tough unit to nail down because of the sheer amount of capability that she has in both of her forms. So it's one of the reasons why I'm again telling you guys, hey, don't necessarily just look at like the images on the screen here. Go watch my other video where you guys can get a little bit more of a better feel for her and what she can do. Now, the other thing to denote is that in her original form, whenever she does use her Noble Phantasm, this will change her into Super Aoko. That's how that mechanic works. It's also going to increase her own Buster performance and extra attack performance permanently. Once she is in that form, she can't really go back. That's kind of the issue that you have. So it's a one-way trip for her. And it's also going to remove her own second active skill buffs. So just keep that in mind when you're plotting things out. But again, Aoko is a very, very interesting unit. You're going to see a lot of people roll for her just because they like her. She's not a gotta have. She's the epitome of a luxury unit, in my opinion, but she is a really fun unit. And as for whether or not she holds up, that one's going to be in the eye of the beholder, depending on how you want to use her. Okay, now for the second campaign there, you're going to get the return of Space Ishtar. For the third campaign, we're going to get Alice. Alice is going to be our new AoE caster, basically. But one of the reasons we're going to talk about her is because she is very unique with sort of certain aspects of her kit. Now, the big thing to point out here is she is a quick AoE caster, but you'll notice she only has the 2 quick cards in her deck and 2 arts cards. And that's apparent right away off the bat, as they immediately go with quick and arts performance of 20% for 3 turns, and then also the charging of her own NP gauge by 50%. So you really want to lure this skill if you can help it, because it's also her NP gain rate. There's so much of her performance tied into this first skill. That being said, her second skill is going to increase her attack and defense for 3 turns. It's going to increase her attack on Forest, City, or Darkness battlefield, and defense on it as well for 3 turns, even further should those come into play. So already after Hassan, you have somebody immediately also interacting with Darkness battlefield. And then the third skill here is going to be Last Robin Rondo, and this one can only be used when the skill user has the Robin counter left. Basically, it's going to grant self-substitution status for 1 attack, 2 turns. special anti-purge defense is what this is. So this is going to be a unique form of solemn defense. Again, go watch my video on her for a little bit more of an explanation here, but that is definitely something to be considered. She is a 70% charger as opposed to just getting the 50% off the first skill. She gets another 20% there. It's actually really nice for somebody that, realistically speaking, just has some great capability already and solemn defense for herself. But how is she trended now over time? We'll talk about that, but let's quickly go down and talk about the Noble Phantasm. Going to increase evasion for 1 turn, increase her own damage against human enemies by 30% for 1 turn. So just a power mod there of 30%. Deals damage to all enemies and inflicts terror status that has a chance to stun them, reducing their critical attack chance as well. And then dealing super effective damage to man attribute. So do denote that human is different here than just the man attribute. Now, why did I say that that her performance is something we need to talk about? Because over time here with quick units, we have gotten the likes of Summer Tiamat, and Summer Tiamat's going to work really well with someone like Alice. It's going to make Alice nigh unkillable and almost a quick variant of that invincible comp, at least from her own standpoint. Summer Tiamat's going to struggle a little bit when those buffs fall off, but obviously you have plenty of time to be able to get the enemy killed in that regard, and they're not really going to have much say in how they can kind of go about attacking you in the interim. So it is an interesting addition to quick units that's going to function and hybridize really well with Alice. So I do believe Alice holds up quite well over time. She's not necessarily the best caster in the game. She's not necessarily somebody that you have to have, but I definitely saw a lot of people roll her at the event, and they were very happy to receive her, and especially with some of the, like, again, improvements of the quick system around her rather than necessarily improvements directly to her that helped her out. That's going to conclude things for April for us, with that event probably overlapping into May. We're going to get the 3200 days anniversary. Again, nothing too much to write home about there, just even more quartz for you guys. And then they took a survey where they decided they were going to rerun some old events. Now, we don't need to really get into the banners at play here for the Chaldean Summer Adventure. This is basically an old summer event coming back. But the reason it is significant is because if you guys haven't paid attention, this event is a miniature lotto. It has the treasure box mechanic, and that treasure box mechanic is really, really solid on top of having an event shop, on top of having point rewards. So again, a whole lot going on here. Let me see if I could actually find the treasure box mechanic for you guys real quick. Yeah, so basically you will get treasure boxes as you do things, and you will be able to secure quite lucrative rewards in terms of what comes out of them. So it's a miniature lotto. You're not going to be getting things like embers and stuff, but you will be getting all ascension mats, which is usually what people crave the most. And that's where I'm going to say this one's going to be a really, really nice event, especially for those of you guys that have already farmed it before, because you'll still have the CEs from last time, right? So again, we don't have to go too much into anything else here. There were some updates to give people updates to their kind of costs for their costumes, but nothing really too much else. And then the return of old event Cs and old units from the event. And like I said, that should take part probably early May for us. Realistically speaking, this will probably be one of the last things before anniversary. Now, we did actually manage to get an interlude campaign, a very rare one. You guys know we don't really get strengthening and interlude campaigns outside of anniversary very much anymore. Not too much to go off of, but this is the Noble Phantasm interlude for Constantine here, and this is going to be the skill upgrade for Don Quixote. So you do have at least some, again, improvements coming in and things to consider, and it will be a banner for both of them, but otherwise, nothing really too much in the realm of that one. We do have the participation aid campaigns. These are, again, just trying to get people kind of caught up, because they put everybody on notice that summer this year was going to be a bit of a doozy, and it was going to be kind of locked a little bit to Ordeal Call 3. So that was something that everyone was surprised about. Nobody expected it to be that fast. So they started trying to get everybody kind of up and running for that. They did have a user questionnaire as well. They asked people, this is basically their survey. They hadn't had one in a long time. Unfortunately, we don't know when the next survey will be for NA. If we're lucky, we'll see one here in January, but it really just depends. And then we had the pre-release campaign for the Dancing Dragon event. This is going to be a new event coming out. This one, you guys should be able to rest assured that this will probably be the last thing that happens before Anniversary, because this is one that has to come out. There was also another interlude campaign, ironically enough, where we do get a Noble Phantasm upgrade for Dobrynya. This does help her out a little bit, but ultimately she still has a little bit of issues with her design, in my opinion. Still really like the unit, but I would love to see them do a little bit more. Now, next up, again, we have the Dancing Dragon Castle. This one is going to start off in late June, but for NA's purposes, this will probably start like mid-June, because again, our anniversary on NA should be somewhere around the July 4th weekend. That is when Anime Expo occurs over in LA, and that is always where the devs try to host Anniversary. So with that in mind, since we know the anniversary date, we know everything has to shift before that, so you guys can kind of just reverse engineer the dates of the events based off of that. Now, the reason this one's going to be significant is because this does include basically Hibiki and Chikagi, both of which are pretty obscure Type Moon references that a lot of people don't know about, and they're definitely an interesting unit to say the least. They're going to be yet another limited unit coming to us here in this event, and they are going to be alter ego. Now, the big thing to denote is, as you guys can see, they are going to be a quick-based AoE alter ego. Now, for those of you guys that know about like Tiamat and stuff, this is the unfortunate nature of things at this point. I can't really say that Hibiki and Chikagi have held up too well because just of the existence of Tiamat. But it doesn't mean that they're a bad unit. You guys can actually see they have the ability to remove all enemies' defensive buffs activating first. And again, same deal. We know that with the likes of Summer Tiamat coming, that's actually going to help out units like this that were maybe kind of on the cusp of being good, but really just kind of lack the proper support to actually be able to do it. There's still somebody that's going to be able to loop. They're still going to be pretty capable, but they're not necessarily going to be like the best of units out there. They're not a unit that you guys have to roll. They will be very useful in their event, but honest to God, I have not really seen or heard of many people using them outside of that. Which tells me a lot, just tells me that they're not people's like go-to in that regard. Again though, the kit's not bad, it's just pretty pedestrian at this point in time. And when we have, you know, crazy units out there like Tiamat, it's hard to argue for people to like go for this sort of thing unless it's just, you know, absolutely in their wheelhouse and they really like gotta collect them, gotta have them all. That's something. It's like if you really like the obscure Type Moon reference here, feel free to go after Azumi no Isora, but ultimately at the end of the day, I think they're a pretty easy skip for a lot of people, and it's really just going to boil down to what your account is looking like. We do get the return of Waver here for those of you guys that didn't pick him up on his initial ticket or haven't managed to get spooked by him over the years, and you do get the return of Sei Shonagon. There is some interesting C's here, but nothing really that kind of screams, hey, you got to roll me either. So to me, unfortunately, from an efficiency and like meta standpoint, this event's not the best. Obviously, don't play the event entirely based off meta, right? Go for what you want. Try to get the things that that you feel like are going to make you happy playing this game. But it's one of those things where I look at that and go like, okay, the devs could have kind of helped out with that a little bit. Again, we get more summer aid participation here. We do get some other campaigns, including Great and Super Success Rate, Bond Points plus 20% for all servants, and basically some summoning campaigns, including the return of some pretty lucrative summer units from the prior year. So you guys are going to get Castoria Berserker, Ace, Mellison Ruler all coming back. And Banner 2 is also going to be some of the older summer units there with Jarcher, Murasaki Rider, Abby Summer. And then summoning campaign number 3 being our oldest, our eldest, most veteran summer units there, Rescritoria and Tamamo Lancer and Surfmo all kind of being very nice targets. Obviously, some of these units could use some buffs, but most of the ones that I mentioned right there still are holding up pretty well over time. So definitely an interesting one that you guys should pay attention to in that regard. We do get a new Ordeal Call campaign here. This is campaign number 7. Really not too much to talk about with this one. But you guys can see they do have basically limited time 0 AP first time clear for the Bleached Earth quests if you hadn't already done them. We're also going to get Hunting Quests Part 14 in July. So this one may or may not be before or after the anniversary. It just depends on the amount of timing and kind of what they have. I expect stuff like that's probably going to get kicked after, but it really just depends. And we'll probably have an efficiency guide out for this. You guys can see as far as this one goes, nothing really too much in the way of campaigns. You will get some teapots for clearing hunting quests and some apples. But otherwise, you really want to clear hunting quests in general just because the benefits that they provide. They usually provide you guys with QP. They usually give you, again, experience cards and ascension materials. So your first one up here is going to be Heroic Proofs. Your next one is going to be Gears. The one after that is going to be LB3 Reactor Cores and Octuplet Crystals. The one after that is going to be Forbidden Pages and Claws. And then the one after that is going to be the Divine Spherical Vein, as well as Homunculus Babies. So both of those are a little bit older now at this point. And then after that, you're going to get Meteor Horseshoes and, again, the Gallstones, basically. So that's going to be your final ones. To me, as someone that's been playing a long time, there's really not a lot here for me to farm in this round of Hunting Quests. But if you're a newer player, Hunting Quests are absolutely fantastic. They're a great way to get yourself some easy experience in Ascension mats. So I do recommend at least kind of paying attention to that. You're then going to get the 9th anniversary download campaign. Like I said, some of this will occur out of order for how we've talked about it. We do have some other campaigns at play here. Really nothing too much to talk about until we get to anniversary proper. So now early August is when JP had anniversary proper. But again, I'd be remiss if I didn't remind you guys that this will probably occur instead of on August 4th. It will occur on NA on July 4th. So there will be a little bit of a difference there in that regard. That means that month gap, they're going to have to kind of shuffle stuff around. That's why I think things like Hunting Quests and stuff may occur after rather than before. But we'll just have to see. So with regards to this, so we do have the 9th anniversary, and there's a lot to talk about with 9th Annie, things that you guys need to pay attention to. Right off the bat, let's just go straight to the actual banner itself. This is going to be Summer Space Ereshkigal. Space Ereshkigal was basically Nasu and the devs' apology attempt for kind of not paying any attention to Erish over the years, and really just not any attention to Rin. They actually openly admitted this. They said that they had wanted to do a version of her prior to this, but they never really got around to it. This is going to be the next beast unit that we have added to the game. And the difference is, if we compare her to the likes of, say, Draco, where Draco is single target, Draco is effective against the 7 base classes. Space Ereshkigal is going to be a little bit different. She is going to be AoE, and she is going to be effective against all the extra classes instead. So each beast class kind of just functions on its own sort of set of rules. So don't expect one to be like the other. But you guys can see the class damage applicability that they have here. And it's a little bit of a difficult thing to understand, but that is kind of what's going on. Keep in mind as well that she also has a unique gimmick with regards to the way that she will gain extra effects. She has a sort of bond gauge that exists in the battle itself, the affection gauge. This can only be leveled up if it is your space Ereshkigal. So in other words, you cannot use somebody else's space Ereshkigal and take advantage of this. And there are some really nice benefits to getting higher gauge. Again, I talk about this at length in her analysis video, but just a quick kind of TLDR rundown is you're going to want to get the gauge higher as fast as you can because it's going to just pay dividends. It never goes back down. It will only increase over the duration of the fight until she is dead or the fight is dead. And then for the buffs that she's going to get, she gets things like charge, attack up, NP damage up. She has crit star bomb, absorption, noble phantasm, charge again here. So up to 70% right there between her two skills. She has invincibility for 2 attacks, 3 turns, guts, self-healing, and basically a debuff cleanse, as well as buff removal resistance and cooldown reduction. So all over the place. And definitely an interesting unit. Now, with regards to it, you know, talking about her, she gets additional effects on her Noble Phantasm depending on the level of gauge that you have. So it's why, again, you will probably want to have your own rather than using somebody else's. But admittedly, it's not the end of the world. I have used, you know, friend support space Ereshkigals, and I haven't really felt like, oh man, that sucked or anything like that. You're gonna lose out a little bit on damage output and some buffs, but it's not the end of the world. But you can see she does have the ability to increase her own instant kill success rate. She does have the ability to grant herself ignore defense and ignore invincibility, depending on that gauge, and even 50 crit star bomb if the gauge is maxed out when she goes to Noble Phantasm. She deals damage to all enemies, then deals super effective damage that scales based off the affection level. So definitely another reason to do that there. And she will remove offensive buffs from the enemy. So things like Invuln Pierce or Defense Pierce can be stripped off of the enemy, kind of preventing them from carving you up. On top of having a chance to instant kill them. And then her overcharge effect is that it will increase her master affection points. So basically Ereshkigal is someone that's going to get really strong over time, over multiple turns during the duration of a fight. She is going to get the capability to, realistically speaking, get stronger and stronger and stronger as the fight goes on. I have heard some complaints, and that is that with regards to the fact that she's only effective against extra attacks or extra classes, it doesn't necessarily make her widely applicable. But ultimately, at the end of the day, you guys can see if you look at the chart again, she's basically neutral against everybody else. So it's really not a big deal. You can definitely take her in as a neutral looper and still be effective against her. I don't feel like that one really holds water too much, especially because a lot of the people that are going to roll for her are going to get multiple copies of her and really kind of kit her out and make sure that she's good. Now, if you're just trying to get away with an NP1, there would be some considerations there as to her strength, but I do feel like Space Ereshkigal has held up pretty well over time, just due to the kind of insane amount of utility that she has in her kit. Now, looking at that, is she a unit that you have to have? No, I would say that she's not. I think a lot of the hype when she first came out, everybody kind of rolled her, but I think now looking back on her, she is definitely another kind of luxury unit where if you have her, she's good, but you definitely don't have to have her. And I would say looking at the way that sort of like the grand duels and the part 2 finale transpired on JP, I'm not going to say Space Ereshkigal was the most useful unit in that regard. Certainly with like the extra grand duels, you could have used her, but I feel like, especially looking at the finale and stuff, you really like, I'm not going to say she was bad. She certainly wasn't, but it was one of those deals where it's like, I wanted to take other units to some of those fights rather than her. So again, is she good? Is she bad? I think that's going to be a little bit more in the eye of the beholder. I do think she is a good, solid unit regardless, but as to how well she holds up, again, that one will depend on you. I do think she holds up, but I've definitely seen some interesting takes over the years as to the viability of extra classes and, again, sort of where things are at in that regard. And taking a look very quickly at the servant strengthening quests, obviously every anniversary, that's going to be one of the ones that we get. And this one is big. I'm not going to move completely on from anniversary. We'll go back and touch some other stuff. We do get a buff for Benny Inema that's going to basically increase her arts and NP. We do also get another upgrade for Gilda Ray Saber. That one's going to be pretty nice, at least in terms of helping him be actually usable. You get a much needed buff to Cleo here, really just helping out her charge. Asclepius gets a pretty controversial buff, I would say, on that one. I definitely remember some people saying that they felt like this was actually a nerf somehow to him. My viewpoint is that those are people that are trying to use Asclepius just only as a sacrificial unit, and that's never really how I viewed him. I understand why people do that sort of thing. I get it, but I don't feel like this buff is actually a bad buff for him. I feel like it's actually getting rid of one of the demerits, and the reason people were upset is because they were exploiting that demerit. Taking a look at this, this is actually going to be a big one for Iskandar here on day 3. This is where he's going to finally get charged. So for those of you guys that have your bro Iskandar kind of in the second archive or just haven't really touched him, feel free to dust him off as he'll now work with the Koyanskaya system. And that's kind of terrifying because he's always been something that's been pretty high on damage output. They do also fix Nitocris Assassin's Double Phantasm finally. They reorder the death proc there, so that's really going to help out her usability. Abby gets yet another insane buff. Frankly, I don't know why they keep buffing OG Abby at this point. She's just getting kind of ridiculously strong, and there's no problem with that, but I do find that one kind of hilarious, how many upgrades they've kind of given her at this point. They also throw another buff to Billy the Kid at this point, kind of helping out his quick damage and really just kind of amplifying him so he holds up in relation to some of the other 3-star archers. They come in and they give Moriarty on day 5 a Noble Phantasm interlude that actually helps pretty much skyrocket him. He is gonna out damage even Mel Ruler at this point and be just kind of one of the premier arts rulers and just rulers overall for damage output. So it's a really, really nice buff for him. Finally, they fix the RNG aspect of Corday's skill there. And then day 6, you're going to get a much needed Noble Phantasm interlude for Hokusai, really helping her out. You're going to get a, frankly, buff for red hair that just doesn't do a whole lot and still kind of misses the mark. And I'm not sure what the devs actually want out of red hair at this point. And then day 7, frankly, I still don't get this one. This was an upgrade to Merlin that a lot of people said that he needed, but to me, this one, well, this does help him kind of hang a little bit with the likes of Proto Merlin. This also does upset a little bit of the balance in the Buster category for buffers, as this kind of is going to allow him to eclipse Koyanskaya of Dark pretty handedly in the support aspect of things. Now, while Koyanskaya of Dark still has damage dealing NP that Merlin does not, this one really does help him out quite a bit. And he has had some sneaky good uses since this upgrade. So what this is going to do is it's going to add charge to his invuln skill. So he gets 10% charge to that on top of the 20% charge he has, turning him into a 30% charger and really helping catapult him into some additional extra like buffing and farming usefulness. Obviously, we get a nice buff here for Nursery Rhyme. Again, this one's also going to be solid for her, so they round out pretty strongly. I do feel like this was a fairly solid batch of strengthening quests with maybe some questionable choices, but ultimately they're all just really going to help out the units that they're given to, with only a couple of exceptions. Now, the Stay Night Remastered Release commemorative campaign, again, this sort of thing already happened. We are not going to get this, so don't worry too much about that. Going back to anniversary here, a second summoning campaign will bring about some of your old units there, as well as some of the units that are being buffed at that point in time, including Cagliostro appearing alongside Sherlock Holmes. So definitely some nice stuff. But we do also have some rate up craft essences, and Flames of Applause is one that I will at least draw your attention to it, is it's all attack scaling. It is 60% gauge at MLB, which is a little bit of a rare 60% C. Definitely a nice one there. Overcharged by 1 stage for 1 time, and critical damage by 10%. Definitely like both of those in terms of their capability, but admittedly the overcharge is a kind of limited one-off effect as opposed to the critical damage always being there. Still a relatively good C that you guys should be aware of. And this is also a good point to bring up the craft essences that are not on rate up but are new, particularly King of Tsukimihara Academy. Well, this one is split stats. It is basically Ox Demon King for attack up. What this means is that you can put this on anybody, and when they enter the field, everybody else in the party gets attack up for 3 turns, including the unit that it's equipped to. So this is ultimately a very, very nice C. I've been lucky. I've managed to snag like 2 copies of this on JP. It's very good for throwing in your back line, particularly when you consider that things like Ox Demon King have now become available again through the Mana Prism shop to be able to purchase. Combining them just means you have even more backline scalability for making your units stronger if they end up rotating out into the field. So now we have to talk about 2 more things. One is this is going to be the Lucky Bag GSSR. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time analyzing this one because obviously when it comes to the GSSR, I'm going to end up making a actual video going over every single unit and talking about considerations and like what things I think are good to go after here. It's going to be 17 banners divided by theme. 5-star servants will be random limited servant based off the pools of servants on the banner. Again, you can only choose 1 pool, so it is what it is. This is as opposed to the GSSR that will be happening next New Year's, where you will be able to choose 2 pools. That is to say, you will get 2 GSSR choices for the first time. That was something that happened as well here on JP, because it is something that they have repeated, but we're not quite to that point on NA just yet. So again, there will be a 4-star that you will be guaranteed among the limited and story servants. So you'll also get that guaranteed 4-star. And then the 4-star and 3-star servant pools are shared between all banners. So it is random, but you will get 1 of these in addition to your 5-star. Naturally, there's some really, really good ones. Obviously, if you're a newer player, your focus is probably going to be on either getting a unit that you just sorely crave, or again, units like the support loadout. Honestly, the Fey Roundtable Domain Pavilion one here just looks kind of crazy good. Same thing with the LB7 one down here, depending on who you need. So there's already just some kind of standout ones. Heck, even Summer Pavilion 2 also looking pretty solid, or Summer Pavilion 3. So I'm not going to spend too long talking about this, but needless to say, you will be getting a GSSR at this time. If you guys are on the fence about spending money on the game, I understand. But if you're going to spend any money on FGO, I recommend doing it for something like a GSSR. And the reason why is going to be because you're guaranteed to get an SSR, as well as, again, in this case, a 4-star unit as well from that pool. So it's definitely nice. It's definitely something to consider. But there is another option here, and that is Destiny Order. Every single anniversary, you guys are going to get the Destiny Order campaign. This does not occur at New Year's. This is sort of the addition, as opposed to, again, that New Year's coming up, you will have 2 options to roll. This one, you'll get Lucky Bag and Destiny Order. So you'll still get 2, but they're going to be different. If you've never done a Destiny Order, what you do is basically you're going to cost yourself 30 premium, aka paid quartz. So not bonus quartz or free quartz, but instead paid quartz. It's going to cost you 30, but what you're going to do is you're going to be able to select one of every single one of the classes. So you have the 7 base classes and then extra 1 and extra 2. This is really, really, really nice, as it does allow you guys to pick units that you specifically want. What you'll do is you'll slot in the units that you want for each of those classes, and then you'll roll and it will give you one of those units. So this is sort of a guaranteed way of getting something that you want. I have seen people like complain that you can't like leave a field blank or something and they got the one thing that they desired the least, but ultimately to me that's on them for selecting and putting in something that they couldn't live with getting. Make sure you're solid in your choices and understanding. You can see as you go through to select what the NP level is and whether or not the unit is limited, story locked, or permanent, but every single SSR is available to you guys here. So I do recommend it, including trying to go after, like, say, Draco, who is not available in normal GSSR pools. This is an interesting thing in that regard. So I do also like, again, Destiny Order for you guys. It is functionally a more target-specific GSSR, and I feel like while you do have to pay a little bit more there, it's still a nice thing. And you can do both this and the lucky bag, so you don't have to worry about, like, oh, can I only do one of these? No, you're fine. You can do both options once. And just for another thing that I feel like I'd be remiss if I didn't mention this, during the 9th anniversary, we ended up getting GSSR basically summon improvements, where this is where from now on, or sorry, not GSSR summon improvements, but basically just summon improvements in general. So with your pity system, every single time you guys go into a banner, the first copy is always a pity unit. So that is, or sorry, not no, the first copy is always going to be covered by pity. That's the correct terminology that I should have used there. After that, trying to roll a second copy or more on that same banner means you're not covered by pity. What this change is at 9th anniversary is it means that now every copy of a unit will have pity associated with it. So that means while the pity is set at roughly 900 quartz, or the equivalent of it, basically 300 spins, that means that you're going to have the capability of always being able to get pity. So even if you go for that second copy, that NP2, it will still be covered by a new pity. Each time you roll the unit, the pity counter resets, but this is a much needed improvement, as this is what I think stopped a lot of people from rolling for that second copy or more, because they were sitting there going, hey, look, there's no point, I'm not covered, why should I, you know, throw caution to the wind and let there be no safety net? Now, I know pity is a contentious topic in FGO. It's set pretty high, and a lot of people really have a lot of strong opinions on it. But to me, I can honest to God look at this and say that this is not a bad thing. At least there is a safety net there for you guys, especially for those of you guys that are trying to get that second copy or more. It's going to be a really beneficial change. So definitely a nice thing to see. It's one that I've been waiting on coming to NA for a long time. On top of that, we also got new append skills, and this was the big one. So this is when the 4th append and 5th append skill are going to come into the game. They are the same across every single unit in the game, so you don't have to worry about variations like there is with the 3rd append. The 4th append skill is going to increase your critical damage up. Do keep in mind, though, there is a cap on critical damage in the game, and it can be reached, and it can nullify the effect of this 4th append. So just be aware that that's a thing with certain loadouts and certain units, but otherwise, this is still a pretty quality append. That being said, the actual game changer here is going to be the 5th append. This skill is fantastic on certain units. This is what's going to allow units the ability to reduce their cooldowns on their skills the first time they're used by up to 1. So this is really, really nice, because you're going to get the capability of taking, like, say, a 7-turn charge skill, like, say, with Arcuid, that didn't work under the conventional Koyanskaya setup, and now with the 5th append skill, it will be able to work, allowing her to just be a fluid double support Black Grail looper. So it's really, really nice. And there's going to be a ton of other units that this actually affects. If you want a pretty comprehensive list of that, feel free to go check out my video on the 5th append. I talked about, at the time, all the units that were released that were massively impacted by the 5th append. So you guys can go check that out for, again, a little bit of a primer as to who you should maybe be thinking about getting the 5th append skill on. So wherein is the problem here? Well, unfortunately, when this came out on JP, this was kind of the final nail in the coffin. Players had been annoyed by the coin system for years already. The devs had even come out and commented via Mr. 2 with him saying that they were aware of it and they were working on a fix for the problem. And then they dropped the 4th and the 5th append on us with no fix. In fact, after saying that there would be a fix coming, they actually ignored it in the next interview that they gave and made no mention of it really ever again, and then dropped this on us. So a lot of people were understandably pissed. This actually threw the JP servers into a bit of a riot. It's a very rare thing to see, but basically the devs knew they messed up and they immediately had to backpedal and deal with it, because the problem at play here to understand is that players that had rolled extra copies beyond even the 5th, players that had worked hard just to get, bonded up to get enough coins just to unlock maybe even one append or to get their unit to 120, this was adding increased strain and burden without providing any new sources of coins for the player base. So understandably, players were upset. Now, I've always contended that rolling that extra copy of a unit, like say rolling NP6 of an SSR, not really worth it. I never really felt like the additional unlocks for your appends was actually worth it, because usually if you look at any unit in the game, one of their appends is just not a big deal and is easily skippable. Trying to achieve that perfection, I always felt like was a little bit of a trap. But there were certainly a lot of people that tried to do that, and they were understandably upset because they felt like they had perfected their unit, and then the devs threw this out there and unperfected all of their units. So it was basically the equivalent of saying, hey, you haven't rolled enough, please roll more, we need more of your money. It was an absolute cash grab, and like I said, everyone was kind of understandably upset by this premise. So, as we mentioned, the devs backpedal, and they actually end up giving us some really nice quality of life improvements over the next month or two. I'm anticipating those quality of life improvements will come to NA with the 9th anniversary, simultaneously with the release of the 4th and 5th append. And I'm gonna go ahead and say this: if they don't, you have the right to get upset as the player. Why? For the exact same reason it was stupid back then. So expect them to drop it on 9th anniversary, or there will be a little bit of hell to pay. So again, basically those upgrades actually fix things. They increase the amount of coins awarded from bonding a unit, making it so that with even one copy of any unit, you can 120 them based off the amount of coins you can get from bond. Simultaneously, they also come in and they make it so that you can move which appends you have around. So let's say you had unlocked the 2nd append, the mana loading append, but you're like, man, I really feel like for this unit, skill reloading is much better, aka the 5th append here. This new system will allow you to switch which append you chose at no cost, no penalty, and it doesn't rely on any currency, so you can immediately switch back too if you want. So you can literally switch the append that you have selected for just one fight if you want, and then switch it back. So it's a really, really nice system. It really helps alleviate the strain and the need for more coins. I really, really do like it. And that's what I've been trying to tell people for a while now. It's like, hey, stop rolling that NP6. There's really just no reason for it. You're not going to get anything out of it in the end because you're going to have the ability to shift this stuff around. So devs do come in and they fix pretty much just about everything wrong with the system, which to me was kind of a sign that the devs always knew how to fix the system. And it sounded more like the monetization guys were saying, no, don't fix it. We're getting money out of this. So I'm not going to blame the devs on that one, but I am going to say that they at least acted quickly and tried to address the issue. So hopefully we will see this again at the same time as it comes out on NA. Sorry for the kind of long rant there, but that was kind of necessary to address that this will be a situation coming up on NA during our 9th anniversary on July 4th. So now with this, we're going to move on as we start moving into summer. Now, summer on JP happened really quick on the heels of anniversary. Basically, anniversary ended on the 14th for JP, and then summer started on the 14th. On NA, again, because our anniversary will be about a month early, I wouldn't expect that, but it's possible. They could give us summer kind of on the heels and just shift stuff around more. That will result in a little bit more of a dead latter half of the year if they do that. But it is what it is. Keep in mind, too, that what is also going to be in conjunction with summer is, on top of the summer event, you'll be getting Ordeal Call 3. It is tied into the summer event, but it is not the summer event. So once they kind of start us on the summer event, they have to also give us Ordeal Call 3 within that same time period. So that is food for thought, as even though we are past the anniversary at this point, some of the stuff still could come earlier due to a shift for things like Thanksgiving, or it could simply be a case if it gets a little bit delayed, but still paired with, you know, Ordeal Call 3 and summer together, because they can't really be separated. Now, talking about summer here, there are a lot of units that we're going to have to talk about. So this event, as we mentioned, timing is going to be a little bit in the ether. We'll just have to see where things are going. We can get a game update. That's a strengthening quest to Artoria Ruler. This one's actually a really nice upgrade for her. It helps her out in terms of her buffing capability. It wasn't exactly what I wanted to see for her, because I definitely wanted to see them address some of the clunkiness of her kit, but it's still really good in terms of making her into a, like, more of a generalistic support rather than just a crit support. So definitely interesting there. And we also get a much needed NP interlude for Tomoe Gozen Saber. Unfortunately, she still needs a little bit more, in my opinion, but that one definitely helped out her damage output and did give her arts performance of 3 turns, which is something she sorely needed in her kit. Ishtar Rider also gets an upgrade to her invincibility skill, kind of just basically giving her even more NP gen and charge, something that she actually kind of needed in order to be able to loop, so it does make her a much more usable unit. Taking a look at the summoning campaigns, starting off right off the bat here, we have Mysterious Executor Seal. Now, I feel like I would be remiss if I didn't say that if there's any unit upcoming this next year that you guys should strongly consider rolling on, it is Seal. She is not a gotta have unit, but Seal is so ridiculously strong that the devs actually, for a period after her release, had a hard time making her not be the solution for a node. To understand why that's the case, again, you can go watch my video on any of these units for a little bit more in-depth understanding. But Seal is the equivalent of almost like old school Jalter used to be, where, yeah, she dealt NP damage, but the real power was in the crits. The exact same thing with Seal. The difference is, 1, Seal is stronger, and 2, Seal has the ability to actually card lock for herself. And that's kind of disgustingly good. So, how does that work? Well, real quick here, just kind of look at her kit. She charges her own NP gauge 10% every turn for 5 turns. She recovers her own HP every turn for 5 turns by up to 1500. She increases her own debuff resistance for 5 turns by 50%, and increases her own buff removal resistance for 5 turns by 100%. So you're not buff stripping her. She's kind of unstoppable due to all of this kind of just feeding back into her. Now we look at skill 2. She gets arts and buster up for 3 turns at 30% each, and a debuff on attack for 3 turns that whenever she attacks with an arts card, it'll inflict healing received down to an enemy, and has a 30% chance to drain them, and removes their gut status. Also, she will grant herself a buff on attack that will charge her own NP gauge by 10% whenever she attacks with a Buster card. It will grant herself critical damage up, which activates if her own HP is 50% or higher for 3 turns. And then grants herself critical damage up, which activates if her own HP is 100% for 3 turns. So at minimum, you're going to get nothing. Over 50%, you're going to get 50. And if your HP is actually at cap, you're going to get another 50, making it 100% extra crit damage there. It's a pretty disgustingly good skill. And we still haven't even gotten to the most broken aspect of Seal. The third skill. This is going to, for one time, one turn, get rid of everybody else's command cards. You will only receive all 5 of Seal's command cards. This means she just has a full deck. Now, on some hand, that can be a little bit restrictive for how you can handle things, but on the other hand, you don't care. Seal's carding and critting power is so strong that you're just gonna be able to card enemies down. I still remember chuckling to myself because I remember when I was playing around with her during the event, somebody came into my stream and tried to tell me that that just wouldn't be a thing outside of the event. And I kind of had my nice little chortle there and said like, yeah, of course, whatever, bro. Because I knew already based off the sheer strength of this, that this was going to be something that was going to be a major problem for the devs. And it ended up being the case. You now had a unit that took away card RNG. It randomly deals 5 new command cards, but they're all Seals because they can't do anyone else's. And it does reset the deck because of that. It's also going to charge your own gauge by 50%. It's also going to increase your own defense for 3 attacks for 3 turns. How much defense, you ask? 100%. So, good luck actually killing Seal. It's going to grant herself a buff on defense for 3 times 3 turns as well that recovers her own HP by 2,000 when she takes an attack. Even if you manage to damage her, she's still healing per turn and still healing per attack and still has 100% defense to just mitigate it all. Yeah, it's kind of ridiculous, honestly. And all of this is on a 6-turn cooldown, which means when you run her with Coin Skya's, yeah, that means in a 3-turn setup, you're selecting Seal's cards twice. So 2 of the 3 turns, you're just going to have all of her cards. It gets kind of broken, especially if you know how to weave a single target NP to kind of stagger enemies even in an AoE wave. That's the thing. I think a lot of people thought like, oh, she's not going to be able to handle AoE waves. And it's like, yeah, you can, because you can just stagger cards. Oh, if that weren't enough, she also has a special unique passive that basically just grants herself attack advantage against the Saber class. It's semi-effective. It's not full 2 times effectiveness, but considering that Seal is a Moon Cancer, she's functionally an archer, which is probably what she originally should have been regardless. Her Noble Phantasm ignores evasion, ignores defense, deals damage to one enemy, and then deals super effective damage against demonic enemies, one of the most common enemies to encounter in a farming scenario. Has a 100% chance to instant kill enemies, and which isn't guaranteed, by the way, and charges her own NP gauge by 20% after the fact as if she's a Saberface. She increases her own NP damage for 1 turn, activating first by a base of 30% that scales upwards to 60% at 500% overcharge. Yeah, Seal's kind of dumb. She does a lot of damage output. I've had many people ask me, like, how many MP levels do you need to be effective with Seal? Truth is, you can be effective with Seal at MP 1. A lot of that firepower, as we already mentioned, is going to be in the cards. Her NP damage is still pretty solid. If you're worried about, like, taking out a wave and having enough there, NP2 is probably that sweet part, that sweet point where you'll probably be able to kill just about anything with an NP2 Seal. No, I'm not really kidding. Like I said, she is that much of a problem in this game that the devs had a hard time creating nodes to be able to farm where you couldn't just take Seal in and win immediately. And even still, to that degree, you could still do that in most nodes that they come out with now. They just finally came out with 1 or 2 of them where it's like, you can't just use Seal. So, yeah, she is a very, very strong unit, and a unit that all of you should consider rolling Whether or not you actually do, that's up to you. But again, fantastic unit. Dobrynya is going to be our next up unit here for this summer. And she is a single target arts lancer now. So very interesting because she's going to sit there and loop. She's going to NP seal them for 1 turn and further reduce arts resistance, meaning she can kind of stack. She's also going to be power modly effective against Earth attribute here with her Noble Phantasm by 30%. It's not the strongest. I would maybe like to see that get a little bit of a tweak, but honestly, she's actually a pretty darn effective unit, especially if you plan on going hard in the paint for seal and get multiple copies of her. She does have charge and arts up in her kit, and she does have the ability to increase her own damage against dragon enemies for 3 turns by a 50% power mod there. Remember, power mods affect not just Noble Phantasm damage, but also any damage. Definitely a nice benefit to her in that regard. She increases her own attack by 20% for 3 turns on waterside battlefield, critical damage and defense as well. And her third skill is going to charge her own gauge every single turn, as well as increase her NP rate and heals per turn, as well as stars. So altogether, she's a pretty synergistic unit, and she does what she needs to do. Her big issue here is going to be that she doesn't actually have really anything in the way of survivability. She's an entirely offensive unit, and that's just really going to be what you go after her for. Now, you will have other considerations, as we already mentioned. Nagao Kagatora will have a buff and will be available via the Evocation Festival. So you don't necessarily have to go after someone like Nikitich, but hey, why not if you're already going to be rolling for Seal? Shufu Avenger is going to be the other unit alongside her, and this is another interesting one. Shufu has Arts and Buster up for 3 turns, NP gauge up of 30%. She has party charge of 10%, and basically charges the party's gauge every turn for 3 turns there, on top of the 10% base that she gives, as well as NP damage up, NP overcharge up. And then will increase her own instant kill success rate for 3 turns, as well as her own NP damage on the 3rd one, and increase by a power mod of 20% damage against enemies with a poison, curse, or burn status, and that can stack. Now, to me, honest to God, Shufu Avenger, not that strong of a unit. She's single target, she's Buster. You can certainly go after her. But we have other units from prior years that will also be available around this time on banners. I don't know that she's the best pickup, but again, same deal. It's like if you're going to roll for Seal, I don't really see any bad side for getting her. She's super effective against Mad Attribute with her Noble Phantasm, and she has a chance to instant kill on her NP, which will, if it does succeed, increase the party's attack by 20% for 3 turns. Being said, instant kill is kind of a meme. I don't think you can regularly rely on that sort of tactic. So to me, she's a little bit of an odd duck here, especially given the cooldowns for her skills being such in the way that you would kind of have to sell out in order to be able to operate with her as your single target. Now, as for the CEs on this banner, with the moon's actually another pretty interesting one. This one's going to be all attack scaling. It's going to be 15% arts up, 15% NP damage, and 20% NP generation rate at MLB. So if you guys ever missed out on Sign of a Smiling Face or Royal Icing, With the Moon is a pretty close equivalent to those CEs. And this one, with it all being all attack scaling and available as a summer CE, it will be one that you guys can pretty easily get your hands on, assuming you are rolling. So it's definitely one that you guys will want to watch out for. Again, there will be rerun banners as well for some of your older units, as we already mentioned. And there will be the archetype Inception, which is aka Ordeal Call 3, sort of launch banner. Now, we'll talk about Ordeal Call 3 here in a minute, but BB Dubai is going to be the unit that's coming in as sort of the second round of banners on on NA at that point for summer. Now, BB Dubai is another interesting one. She is an AoE arts support Moon Cancer. What do I mean? Well, she's both support and arts, and it really depends on how you use her. There's different stages that will apply different traits There's an interesting deck there, and she does have a little bit of peculiarities when it comes to her kit. So starting off with the first skill here, she increases the party's darts performance for 3 turns, charges the party's NP gauge by up to 20%, and grants the party preservation target buff except for herself for 3 turns. She will increase the NP damage of Moon Cancer or living human allies and the NP generation of Moon Cancer or living human allies, both for 3 turns, 30% each. Her second skill will remove all enemies' buffs. Definitely a nice effect to have, assuming, again, those buffs aren't bolted down by a white box that's going to prevent their removal. But it will also reduce their attack for 1 turn by a whopping 100%. Now, if they have steroids, this can still allow the enemy to deal some damage, but this will drastically reduce the amount of like forward firepower that a unit has coming at you. Just bear in mind, if they are debuff immune or attack down immune somehow, this will not come into play. It will reduce their art's resistance for 3 turns by 20% and inflict non-preservation target debuff to those enemies. It will increase the critical star generation rate and critical damage generation rate of Moon Cancer living human allies for 3 turns, basically by a nice amount. And then our third skill is going to reduce her own skill cooldown by 1, charge her own gauge by up to 50%, and then select which type of noble phantasm she would like to use for the next 3 turns. Now, again, you guys can go check out my video on her for the specifics of that one, but let's quickly talk about basically some of her additional effects. She has some pretty interesting passives as she increases her own attack against enemies with evil alignment, and basically increases her own defense against enemies with lawful alignment. Her Noble Phantasm in its AoE capacity is a 5-hit AoE Arts NP. It's going to increase damage against enemies with Sky and Star attribute by 30% as a power mod for 1 turn before damage output. She's going to deal damage to all enemies and then reduce their Arts resistance by 20% for 3 turns after the damage goes out. She will also deal extra damage to enemies with the non-preservation target status that is super effective. Considering this is a trait buff and it's something that she applies to enemies with that skill, yeah, it's just a free damage modifier type skill on a 6-turn cooldown. That's really, really nice. Taking a look at her support NP. So this is going to be if you choose the support NP. Instead, it is an art support NP. It will grant the party invincibility for 1 turn. It will grant the party debuff immunity for 1 turn. And it will increase the party's NP damage for 3 turns. To me, I would have liked to have seen multi-turn duration here, but hey, you can't really argue with a unit that can be both an AoE nuker for you and a support on a whim, because she can change back and forth, unlike the likes of, say, like Melisande. So this is a really beneficial thing for her, as it does mean if you find yourself in a tight spot, you can choose to turtle for a little bit with dropping her into a support loadout. It's also going to charge the NP gauge of allies that have the preservation target status except for herself by a base of 30%. There's definitely another nice effect there, as this turns her into almost a like pseudo Tamamo there, just minus the ability to like heal and cooldown reduce for the party. So still really, really a nice and interesting effect. Now, is BB Dubai somebody that holds up well over time? In my opinion, yes. Yeah, I actually feel like she's really, really solid for that flexibility that we talked about earlier with her Noble Phantasm. Her damage output's pretty solid. It's not the best out there by any stretch of the imagination, but her refund numbers are good. She has pretty decent charge, and she has all the capabilities in her kit to kind of delay damage coming to the party and protect the party when necessary in a pinch, on top of still being the devoted damage dealer if she needs to be. So I actually do really like her. I think she fits well into hybridized systems, into single damage dealer systems, and anywhere in between. So to me, yes, BB Dubai, a fantastic unit. Not a unit you have to have, but definitely a decent pickup for a lot of people. Next up here, we've got Tenochtitlan, aka the city, Moon Cancer version. So this is going to be her summer version. She is going to be, again, a Moon Cancer. She's going to be quick. She's going to be AoE. She's going to ignore invincibility for 1 turn and deal super effective damage against super large enemies, which is kind of ironic given her other form, and increase her own damage, or her own MP damage for 1 turn. To me, she's a little bit of a clunky unit, though. She's going to charge the party's gauge by 20% with her first skill, recover the party's HP every turn for 3 turns by up to 1,000, increase the party's attack for 3 turns, and then basically end up, as we come to the second skill here, have a taunt skill that will also increase her own defense by a whopping 50% for 3 turns, and grant herself a buff on defense that increases her own MP damage when taking an attack. She's going to be way more of a unit that's optimized for challenge scenarios and less one that's going to be like your fluid looper for farming. She's going to increase her own quick and buster performance for 3 turns, grant herself evasion for 1 turn, and then increase the critical damage of bunny servant allies for 3 turns, as well as reducing their cooldown. So it's definitely an interesting and odd pairing if you want to see who bunny servants include, more than you actually would otherwise believe. So there is quite a bit there. But yeah, to me, she's just kind of a very niche unit. She's a very challenge-oriented unit. She's definitely not a gotta have unless you just love Tenochtitlan in that regard. So if you're going after Tlaloc, feel free to. But yeah, to me, I'm gonna say this is the epitome of, again, a unit you really just don't have to have. Next up, we have Mysterious Heroine Double X Altar. Now, Double X Altar is another interesting one. To me, they got a little bit stale with the design on this one, as it was pretty clear that they were trying to do a buster form of Double X, but it's an interesting one. She does have a gorilla deck. She's single target buster foreigner here, and she does have a 7-hit NP that increases her own damage against lawful and good alignment enemies by a 30% power mod for 1 turn each before damage goes out. Deal damage to 1 enemy, and then she deals 200% super effective extra damage to ruler class servant enemies. So she does at least have that niche. She's also going to charge her own gauge by 20% on the back end of her MP, and then increase her own NP damage by a base of 10% activating first. She's a very serviceable unit, still a little bit clunky. She has invincibility for 2 times 3 turns, increases her own attack for 3 turns, grants herself critical stars every turn for 3 turns, and gains critical stars on the use of that first skill. Her second skill increases her own buster performance for 3 turns, increases her own critical star absorption for those buster cards by 500%, and then increases her own critical damage for 3 turns by 30% as well. And her third skill is going to be an AoE drain, as well as a charge to her own gauge of 10% based off the number of enemies. In a similar way, where I found this a really weird thing when they did it with how basically, I often found that this is just an odd way to handle a charge skill on a unit that is single target. So naturally, you want to be fighting a single boss enemy if you're going to take her, not necessarily a bunch of enemies as a single target unit. So this skill gets better depending on the more enemies you're facing, but the unit is optimized to face less enemies. It's also going to, again, charge her own gauge by a base of 20% and increase her own NP generation rate by 30% for 3 turns on a buster unit. So a little bit weird, especially for a unit that has a gorilla deck. Certainly usable though. Damage is not bad and absolutely capable of being that stand-in for someone like Double X if you just need that single target foreigner nuker for getting rid of, say, those pesky pretender bosses that you might encounter. Still, at the end of the day, not a gotta have either. Obviously, I'm a Saberface fan, so I'm a little bit biased in that regard. But just shooting you guys straight, she is still a pretty clunky unit and definitely not a unit that you have to have. So I think this kind of second banner here is a little bit more up in the air, going to be depending on whether or not you really just want one of these units, particularly BB Dubai. That's going to be that primary attraction there. There will be the male craft essences here, including bright blue, which does give all attack scaling, invincibility, and NP damage and critical damage as another consideration for your CEs. But ultimately, nothing too much to write home about. With regards to the new Cs not on rate up, there is some potential for Paradise of Ecstasy, as it is a more specialized form of demonic Bada Vada that we had from back in the day. It's all attack scaling, starting gauge of 50%, overcharge the NP of 2 stage 1 time, but then art's up. So you don't get that odd 60%, but you trade that for some more damage and all attack scaling that the original CE did not have. And then as we go to talk about archetype inception, keep in mind again that it will coincide with the release of the second banner for summer, but that will be a little bit delayed because the summer event comes out 2 weeks prior to that. That being said, it will release in 3 waves, so you're actually going to kind of get stalled out and not have the capability of finishing Ordeal Call 3 right away due to artificial time gates that you just kind of put in. They really didn't need to do that, but they kind of wanted to drag it out and pad for time, so it's understandable as to why they did. But what should we consider with the Ordeal Call 3 release? Well, for starters, there is some quality of life here. I don't think you have to worry about it too much. It is a Kiara animation update, and we do get a strengthening to King Protea that's actually just going to help her skill cooldown time, and realistically speaking, increases her own buff removal resistance and charges her EP gauge with this skill. So it's a really, really nice upgrade for her in that regard. Kiara is going to get a buff to what was already one of her most broken skills already, as it's going to remove the demerit of dealing damage on her 3rd skill. It's going to increase the party's damage against good alignment enemies for 3 turns, charge the party's NP gauge, and overcharge the party's NP stage by 1 time for 3 turns. So yeah, it's just kind of a dumb ability in terms of it just really helps out her already ridiculously good utility. Again, the summoning campaigns were the ones that we already talked about. The return of Coin Sky of Dark, King Protea, Astolfo Saber, Janako, and some other units here that are maybe a little bit rare. And the 3rd summoning campaign is going to be the return of Archetype Earth. So if you haven't had the opportunity to snag an Arcuid prior to this point, especially with that 5th append coming into the game, this will be your next opportunity to grab one. Now, same deal here. I would also be remiss if I didn't mention what is supposed to be the summer welfare. Unfortunately, the summer welfare is not actually given to you until you beat Archetype Inception. That is to say, the welfare unit you're supposed to get from summer is not handed to you until you beat Ordeal Call 3. And given the time locks that are going to be at play, you're not going to actually be able to beat Ordeal Call 3 until, at least on JP, what was September 20th. On NA, this may be a little bit sooner. We'll just have to see. But that's going to allow you to pick one of the Hakunos. Now, it's going to be a really interesting thing with them because the way they are going to work is going to be that you must pick one of the 2, either the male or the female form. They both have the exact same kit. The only thing that differs is the appearance, but they both do count as a separate unit, similar to the way Mecha Ellie works. The difference is you will only get one of them upon completion of Ordeal Call 3. You will have to choose them, and you will not be guaranteed to get the other version until later when they make Ordeal Call 3 into a main interlude. Now, it's possible this could happen earlier on NA than it did on JP, but I wouldn't count on it because the devs definitely need to pad and stall for time. So, looking at the kit here, just real quick, there's a couple things to consider. I actually don't feel like the Hakunos are overall that strong of a unit. They are a Moon Cancer, and they are an AoE one. The big claim to fame that they are going to have is that they are the first unit ever in the game to ignore anti-purge defense. That is to say, they can pierce solemn defense. That buff that y'all have been relying on with Castoria, yep, this is the unit that breaks that. So it is interesting. The exception is that while it will pierce solemn defense and invincibility, it will not pierce evasion. So you do have a counter to it if you use evasion-based units. Again, you have a counter to Hakuno's NP. Why I'm saying that, I don't know. Choice is yours. But there will be a chance to stun them as well on the overcharge effect, but still, as long as you avoid the MP, you're good. For the active skills, this one's kind of one of the nuttier skills in the game, and I've used it myself to very hilarious effects. Because this first skill can only be used when their own NP gauge is 10% or higher. It will drain their NP gauge. When there are fewer than 50 critical stars, it will gain critical stars. It will also randomly deal 5 new cards. So it is a shuffle skill, and it will reset the deck so that this becomes the first turn of the new card cycle. What's the catch? Well, look at the cooldown of this skill at rank 10. Oh yeah. So, if you choose to charge Hakunos with a external support, if you choose to equip them with a CE that gives them charge, they are a finite but extremely repetitive card shuffling unit. If nothing else, you can just slot them in the party and go, hey, I don't like those cards. I'm going to bring them in, and I'm just going to keep shuffling until I get the cards that I want. And this actually is the strategy that I used for crit farming the extra 1 boss for the Grand Duels, and it actually worked hilariously so. So, yeah, it's a spammable skill, and really kind of ridiculous. The second skill increases own quick arts and bust performance of 30% each for 3 turns. So when that's not in play, you're a little bit of a lame duck, but still really nice. It's going to grant a buff on attack for 2 times 3 turns that will grant evasion for 1 turn when you attack with a quick card. It will charge the NP gauge by 20% when you normal attack with an arts card, and it will increase critical damage by 20% for 3 turns when attacking with buster cards that will activate before the card damage goes out. The third skill will allow you to select one of the options below, which just increases your own damage against enemies with Sky, Earth, or Man attribute, as well as charging your own NP gauge by up to 30% and gaining 10 critical stars every turn for 3 turns. What does that mean? That means you literally have them as a star producer, especially based off the first skill, and you also, within their own kit, have the ability to give them 30% more charge to allow them to reshuffle their cards, again, 3 more times. So it's kind of hilarious. If you're worried about knowing whether or not your enemy is Sky, Earth, or Man attribute, by the time Hakuno comes into the game, there is a quality of life that on inspection of an enemy, if you hold down on top of them on the screen, you will be able to see in the corner what type of attribute they have of the major actual attributes, not their traits, mind you, but the actual major grouping of Sky, Earth, Man, Star, or Beast attribute. You'll be able to see which one they are. So this will allow you to optimize Hakuno against the enemy that they are facing, and definitely fantastic in that regard. So don't sleep on Hakuno, a very sneakily good utility unit that can provide you with a lot of solutions to, shall we say, modern problems. And again, you will have to make a choice between the 2 of them, and you will not be able to get the other one until the main interlude for Ordeal Call 3 comes out much later. As we move on into September, we do have the Lost Belt 4 clear support campaign. They're just trying to get people, through story in order to get stuff done. Your Ordeal Call 3 participation support campaign is basically just saying like, hey, we're going to give you guys teapots, crystallized lore, bond grails and stuff if you guys have done the story. Make sure you guys are staying up to date on that and actually managing to get through the stuff. And then, as we mentioned before, there will be kind of chapter releases to Ordeal Call 3. There will be 3 parts: the initial part, the second part, and then the third part. And the third part will be coming to you roughly around September 20th. That'll be the earliest, as we already mentioned, that you guys can get, again, your Hakuno as a permanent unit. Looking at the Killmoth banner here, it's a Sinnoh Riku banner with some older CEs coming back. Nothing too significant. Just understand that usually the Killmoth banner on NA turns into a back-to-school campaign. Worthy of consideration there for you guys, even though we won't actually get Killmoth. We've got the Lost Belt 5 clear support campaign, and the one you've all been waiting for, the 30 million downloads campaign in early October. Now, again, this could be basically late August for us, but looking at this one's significant. Why? Because this one is going to bring back another SSR selector ticket. Your requirement is going to be to clear Orleans, and you're going to have the capability of keeping the unit as long as you reach level 60 on the unit and bond 5. This is going to be significant. The only big thing that I can say is that the unit you select here will not give you a USO, so keep that in mind. Don't try to use this for USO farming. But basically, all of your permanent and story-locked units are available in this one. So there's quite a bit here. I'll end up making another video talking about this. I believe I did when it came out on JP, but obviously we'll need to revise for modern considerations. But still, there's a lot of good options here, in the same way that past selector tickets have afforded people options for either grabbing a support they didn't have, shoring up a damage dealer, getting additional coins, or again, just trying to acquire a rare or hard to get unit that you don't necessarily want to roll for. So there's a lot to be considered in that regard that can really, really help you out. There will be login bonuses and refreshes of the Da Vinci Workshop. You will have missions that will grant you some additional stuff, including, again, these tickets that will allow you guys to actually be able to refresh the Pure Prism shop. You'll be able to select one item from the Pure Prism shop and refresh it, allowing you to buy additional stuff from that. So let's say you had purchased all of the meteor shards from the Pure Prism shop. You can get the ticket, and you can refresh it, and you can get the full amount back again, which you will still have to buy with more Pure Prisms, but it makes it available again. Here's the kicker. You can only refresh an item one time. So unfortunately, you can't just sit there refreshing those meteor shards over and over and over again, which is unfortunate, because I would love to do that on my account, but it is what it is. But still, you'll get a couple of these every now and then. They've managed to give out, I want to say, roughly 10 of these on JP at this point in time. They're not super common, but you definitely want to make sure you guys get as many of them as you can if you're somebody that really likes to make the most out of the Pure Prism shop. Obviously, there's going to be quartz given out for some of these missions. There will be a reward command code for completing them all that's going to increase damage against enemies with lawful alignment and NP generation rate of the engraved card. You will get a friend list update that's going to increase the cap, basically. And as we already mentioned, the Pure Prism update here will make all main story map quests now reward twice the amount of Pure Prism. So you're going to get a nice influx of them at this point. If you didn't, like say you had already used them all, you'll get another big boon depending on the amount of quests you've completed. If you haven't completed them all, don't worry. It's just going to be a permanent update that will increase the amount of rewards. So when you do complete story chapters, you'll still get more. And again, this is the new reset system for the Pure Prism Exchange shop with the tickets, as we already mentioned, coming in. So it's definitely a much welcome thing. You're also going to get Stargazer's teapots added to the Mana Prism shop on monthly reset, as well as, again, some past command codes becoming available and past sort of Mana Prism shop sees becoming available once again. Plus, the Remember Essences will be adding some older ones, though admittedly the big one here is going to be Ox Demon King. All of this, again, happening early October, or again, maybe as early as late August. For your summoning campaign, again, this one's worth mentioning. Oberon will be returning as a unit on this banner. So for those of you guys that are trying to get your hands on him because you need him to fill out your support loadout, this is going to be one of those ways that you guys can do so. And again, there will be past units available with their CEs from things like Anniversary and New Year's. So you will have opportunities to roll Castoria yet again, Scotty, and various others here that may be worthy of your attention, depending on your account's needs. So the 30 million downloads campaign, going to be absolutely a fantastic time for everybody with the Servant Selector and Mana Prism / Pure Prism shop changes. Next up, we're going to end up having the Fairy Sugoroku event coming to us basically mid-October. Again, this may be early October, depending on the timing of the 30 million downloads campaign. Remember, download campaigns also can move around depending on how things work. For Fairy Sugoroku, this one is going to be your Khadroth drop event. Just very quickly looking at the game updates here, we can see that we're going to get an upgrade for Yagyu, a much needed Noble Phantasm interlude. And hilariously enough, Emiya is going to get an upgrade to his evasion that's going to increase his own attack, increase his own defense, and gain critical stars. And Geronimo is finally going to get a skill upgrade that will increase one ally's quick performance for 1 turn and reduce their skill cooldown by 1. Admittedly, this is not quite good enough to really call him a quick support. It can certainly be used, but, you know, would have liked to see maybe somebody more along the lines of like Shu Fu as a low star quick support. Melt is going to get just frankly the kind of crazy Noble Phantasm interlude at this point. And this is really going to rock the socks off of just about everybody in the cavalry triangle of units that's single target, as this is just going to make Melt really ridiculously outscale just about everybody. I've seen, you know, subsequent things where people have questioned why certain units got buffs, particularly Kama, for instance. The reason Kama got a buff is because that Melt buff is pretty ridiculous, honestly. So it's really going to help out her damage output, just really make her kind of insane, as it's going to allow her to remove one enemy's buffs activating first, and also increase her own quick performance for 3 turns, and still upgrade the amount of damage output on top of that. So it really does just absolutely catapult her in terms of capability. Taking a look at the summoning campaign here, there's going to be a friend point summoning campaign. This will allow you to summon more of the Hakuno that you have already selected, but not the one that you haven't. This is a good time if you want to acquire like NP5 to roll out your FP. So I do recommend saving some for that. And you will also have a Melt summoning campaign with Wang Fei Hu. Now, let's talk about the actual summoning campaign for this. The CE available here is going to be more than any gemstones in the world. This one at MLB featuring Koyanskaya is going to be all attack scaling, buster up of 15% at MLB, increasing NP damage by 10%, and overcharging the NP by 2 stages 1 time. Again, overcharge on a CE is a limited effect, so it's not really a great thing to have, but still a pretty quality CE, especially if you're just looking for some kind of one-shot potential, but need, again, some carding capability as well. Now, taking a look at Khadroth drop on this, she's going to be paired alongside Emiya, Geronimo, and Yagyu, who himself is story locked. But Khadroth drop's going to be an interesting unit for a lot of reasons. Kind of comes into the game at a little bit of a weird point. She is coming into a quick system that sorely needs some additional options, and she is providing a little bit of that. She's not going to be the savior of quick by any means. She's not going to be a replacement for Scotty. she can function pretty interesting. Her primary gimmick and what she's really going to be known for is the ability to charge her own gauge by 50%, but then further charge her own gauge based off the number of Sakura series units on the field, except for herself. This includes allies and enemies. And if they're not a Sakura unit on the field, she can reduce cooldowns by 1 for herself. That's going to be her major claim to fame. It's really going to help out her capability. She's going to reduce all enemies' defense for 3 turns on her NP with the overcharge effect, deal damage to them, reduce their attack by 20%, and have a 40% chance to stun them, kind of locking them down. Same deal in stage 3, it's just a different form. Now, the first skill, though, is also worthy of understanding, because the way this skill works, again, I do talk about it during her video, is that's going to reduce all enemies' NP charge by 1, increase their own debuff success rate, increase Khadroth's own debuff success rate by 30% for 3 turns, and grant herself a buff regeneration that activates at the start of a player turn for 2 times. What does that do? At the start of a player turn, it will inflict quick resist down every turn for 1 turn to all enemies. So that is going to be by 50%. That's interesting because this is basically a debuff that will travel wave to wave with her instead of just being a one-off thing due to the delayed effect. Especially since this occurs at the start of the player turn, not at the end of the player turn. That is going to be especially useful when you're moving between waves. It will also inflict critical attack resistance down every turn for 1 turn to them, and reduce their critical attack resistance and reduce all enemies' quick resistance for 1 turn whenever the skill is activated. Let me help you guys understand this. The critical attack resist regen, aka the critical attack resistance down, means that the enemy will take more crit damage if that is on them. So it's, again, gonna kind of increase your firepower should you manage to crit. Her being a quick unit, she will have stars abound if she's kind of running through her Noble Phantasm. And again, if you're pairing her up with the likes of, say, like Summer Scotty or somebody that has a Star Bomb or stars per turn. But admittedly, her best pairing at this point is probably going to be Summer Tiamat, just due to the quick and art synergy that's going on there. So I found in a lot of ways that Khadroth has often been an overhyped unit. She is certainly not bad and is very capable, but I have seen people trying to say that she is like literally a like Scotty replacement, and no, unfortunately she's not. She doesn't have the party support for that sort of thing to be the case, but she is still a quality unit and can still be a very effective damage dealer for you guys, especially because one of the big things that you guys are going to see is that she increases her own damage against Sakura series enemies by 30% with her passive, as well as increasing her own damage against same class enemies as her own by 75%. The only things that this excludes is Shielder and Beast. What does that mean? Literally any class that she kind of pairs up against, she's going to deal extra damage. So she kind of is a little bit of a berserker in that regard and going to be able to deal effective damage because her third skill changes her own class to the targeted enemy for 3 turns. So she just pairs up as the same class of an enemy and then deals 75% extra damage to them. Now, admittedly, this is not a whole lot, but it's still something. So it is an interesting skill nonetheless, and it does make her a pretty effective sort of like neutral looper, if you will. Now, do you have to have Khadroth? No. Does Khadroth hold up well? Yes. Especially, again, as we already mentioned, with Summer Tiamat coming into the game that will pair up with her nigh perfectly. So it is an interesting thing nonetheless to see that. But ultimately, at the end of the day, whether or not you go for her is going to be your choice. We will have the autumn enhancement campaign here. Nothing too much to write home about. It's more of a, hey, please complete your story. Hey, please do this other stuff. And then a great and super success rate for just the following servants. It's basically a cleverly designed please clear the main story campaign. And then from there, we move into November. Now, you will have the Lost Belt 6 clear support campaign, where you will again get banners for some of the Lost Belt 6 units, including Morgan Le Fay and Melisande. So definitely another interesting banner there that you guys should pay attention to. From there, we go into the Mystery House Crafters event. And this one's significant because it's going to include yet another welfare that we frankly have not gotten very many of this year at this point. So it's definitely one to consider here. And we also are going to have Tutankhamun. So let's start out by looking at the game updates. Where Asterios gets his battle animation update. Breedomart's going to get a much needed NP interlude to really help out her damage. It's basically going to help her reduce all enemies' quick resistance for 3 turns, reduce their buster resistance for 3 turns, deal extra damage, and then again give the extra damage to Rider enemies on overcharge. Super Bunyan also going to get a much needed NP interlude thanks to Melt basically killing Super Bunyan and leaving them for dead in the side of a ditch somewhere. So this really helps Super Bunyan at least kind of hold up in the face of Melt's damage numbers. But still, unfortunately, Melt does have a lot of utility with that buff strip capability now. So to me, in a weird way, you could almost still buff Super Bunyan again in the face of someone like Melt. The advantage that Super Bunyan's going to have, Super Bunyan's Buster, and is going to be able to kind of work in a precise system due to that. And then Van Gogh getting an upgrade to her attack there, basically granting a new effect that will help her if she successfully removes the curse debuff when attacking with her quick cards. It will charge her own NP gauge as a new effect there. So again, Van Gogh having curse control and being able to manipulate it around, being able to remove it from an enemy, now gets her charge on that attack. So really, really nice for her in terms of getting her to another Noble Phantasm cleanly. We're also going to have a welfare in this event that's not shown here, basically. But our 2 new units are going to be the welfare Van Gogh Miner and Tutankhamun. So let's talk about Van Gogh Miner here. Van Gogh Miner is kind of an interesting one because I think a lot of people just did not expect this. And then even when they looked at the unit and saw the design, they were kind of underwhelmed by it. But Van Gogh Miner is a little sneaky. Now, admittedly, the devs did kind of immediately buff Van Gogh Miner. It was one of the faster buffs I've ever seen in the game. But basically, as you guys can see, she is AoE quick as a Lancer welfare. She deals damage to all enemies. She's super effective against lawful alignment, has a 40% chance to stun, and adds the city battlefield status to the field for 5 turns. So she does at least be able to kind of bring that field with her, which is, again, a little bit of a rarity. Having that on a welfare is certainly a nice thing. And then her overcharge is going to increase MP damage for 1 turn. But taking a look at her first skill here, it can only be used when there's 10 critical stars or more, and she'll lose those critical stars. And then she can select one of the options, which is to increase the party's quick, arts, or buster performance for 3 turns by 20%. From there, we'll also increase the party's NP generation rate for 3 turns by up to 20% as well. The second skill, she increases her own max HP for 3 turns, charges her own NP gauge by 30%. That's going to make her at least that 30% charger for fitting in nicely with someone like, say, Oberon that has 20% built in as well as 50%. You can kind of brute force loop her a little bit. But she's also going to have a critical star bomb here and then gain an additional 10 critical stars on city battlefield. So you can use this skill turn 1, or you can wait until say turn 2 after you've already Noble Phantasmed with her the first time. And it is city battlefield to go ahead and get even more stars out of that star bomb. So it's definitely a nice thing there, as that will gain you, let's say you had the skill all the way leveled up. Instead of 20 stars, that would get you 30 at that point. So it's a pretty sizable star bomb. Granted, you are dealing with quick units here, so I'm not sure you're necessarily going to need the stars that much, but it is what it is. And then Originally, her third skill was just dousing B, which granted herself evasion for 2 attacks, 3 turns, and increased her own critical attack chance resistance for 3 turns. That scaled up to 30%. That was kind of underwhelming. The devs pretty quickly just come back in the middle of the event and say, you know what? Yeah, it did kind of suck. Here you go. I assume this was always planned. I don't think it's them trying to like make up for designing an underwhelming unit. I think this is 100% always part of the devs like iteration, and they just decided to release the unit in an incomplete state that you could have and work on, and then further increased it. But you guys can see, basically in this case, this is where the critical stars are really going to come into play, because now she gains the effect that when there are basically a scaling amount of critical stars or more, it will increase the critical damage for 3 turns, and this does stack basically. So it's 30% at each level depending on the level of the skill, assuming you have it maxed out. It's 30% at each level there. So if you have, again, 10 critical stars, that's 30%. If you have 20, that's an additional 30 for 60. If you have 30, that's an additional 30 for 90. If you have 40, that's an additional 30 for 120, and 50 all the way up to 150% extra crit damage there. So it does make her a little bit of a kind of insanely sneaky crit unit, and it does make her really pop off, especially if you're supporting her with the likes of Scotty, who's going to give various bonuses to crit damage. So you guys can see she also is actually pretty nicely kitted out deck-wise for Scotty, due to the fact that she has double buster, double quick, which means she's going to work with both iterations of her. So definitely a really, really nice one there. Obviously, as we start to consider things moving forward, you have definitely some interesting stuff with regards to like Summer Tiamat coming into the game, but I think Van Gogh Minor is still a pretty solid welfare for what she is, and definitely not somebody that you guys should look the gift horse in the mouth on. Now, Tutankhamun is another interesting one. I think there's some pretty interesting takes on Tutankhamun. He's definitely been a weird unit, I would say, over time. Now, I have on some instances found that a lot of people feel like he's completely underwhelming, and in other cases I've seen people like use him kind of, again, like in sneaky good situations where he's like the key to a challenge composition. So it really just kind of depends. But what's his claim to fame? We're going to start with the Noble Phantasm again. He is a single target arts archer who's 5-star. It's 5-hit single target. He deals damage to one enemy. He deals super effective damage against demonic enemies. He inflicts curse of 1000 damage for 5 turns, and an evil curse status that boosts it for an additional 5 turns by 100%. He has a 100% chance to insta-kill. It's not guaranteed. It's just a higher rate. And a 500% chance to sacrifice himself. What does that mean? That means when Tutankhamun fires off his NP, he gonna die. That is his claim to fame. He is single target 5-star Arash. And that's where he's really gonna see a lot of use. It's kind of sad because his damage is not the worst, so you could actually like do some interesting stuff with him, but admittedly his primary gimmick is going to be, oh, okay, I've done my job, time to get out of here and let somebody else have a crack at it. So he's going to increase his own NP damage for the overcharge effect. His first skill here is going to charge the party's NP gauge by up to 20%. It's going to increase the party's NP damage for 3 turns, also up to 20%. And then he will grant himself an on Guts activate buff for 3 turns that will gain 30 crit stars when Gut status is activated. But again, it's also going to basically grant him an on death activate buff for 3 turns as well that will gain 30 critical stars whenever he's defeated. So this is an interesting thing. It means that you can kind of try to kill him over and over again if you want. His second skill is going to increase his own arts performance for 3 turns, up to 30%, and grant himself a debuff on attack for 3 turns that inflicts curse for with 500 damage for 5 turns to an enemy when attacking, and charges his own gauge. So from there, you're going to have a 30% charge skill hit with him here. This is going to make something like mana loading really kind of important on Tutankhamun, as combining a maxed out mana loading with a 30% charge is going to be 50% right there. And then his third skill is going to grant himself gut status 1 time 3 turns. That's going to basically allow him to withstand his Noble Phantasm Zone effect. The guts will prevent the death proc from killing him. It will kind of drain him out and act like it's going to kill him, but then the guts will revive him. It's also going to grant himself debuff immunity for 3 turns and charge his own gauge by an additional 30%. So right there, now you have 60% baked in. Again, the mana loading is going to be 20%. You only need another 20% to get Tutankhamun to full. So it does make him an interesting unit. He's definitely somebody that I feel like has some niche uses and can still be a decent option for you as a little bit of a single target. The problem that you're going to have, again, is just that he has just the one source of guts. So if you want him to actually stay alive for a full 3 turns, you got to have another source of guts pretty much to keep him up. To me, though, that's not really his wheelhouse. He's not really meant to do that. But this is a very interesting character to design as a 5-star. We have memed about it for years that the devs would probably put in a 5-star Arash, and at this point they kind of have done it. The issue about this is, and the reason we always assumed it to be a meme, is because that's a lot of party cost to be throwing on a unit that's their goal is to kind of just take out a wave and self-sacrifice themselves. So realistically speaking, there are other units that can do that, including low-star units that can get the job done. So it is kind of a little bit of an odd choice design-wise. I do find it interesting. I don't think Tutankhamun's a bad unit per se, but I do think he's a unit that people should maybe like kind of look and ask themselves, do they actually need this before they roll? Because again, I think there's going to be that issue of like, you're just not going to use him very often. So the choice is yours. I'm not going to again say he's bad, but I do think he's the epitome of a unit that you don't necessarily have to roll. Unfortunately, he is limited. I think he would be maybe even a little bit better as a permanent unit where maybe you could get spooked by him and then people would gain the benefit of kind of acquiring him without much investment. But because he's limited and you've got to kind of roll, not a whole lot that you can really do about that. And it's going to make it a little bit weird for people. That is Tutankhamun and Van Gogh Minor. Taking a look real quick here at the summoning campaign that Tutankhamun's on. You do have some interesting Cs, but none of them are really going to be that good. Nothing you need to like kind of try to level up or anything like that. So to me, not that big of a deal. You also have a second banner here with Mao Nobu and Burrito Mart, and then a third campaign involving Super Bunyan and OG Van Gogh there. So definitely an interesting event in that regard. All right, then we'll get the 3400 days anniversary. Again, just kind of more quartz, so pretty much what you guys can expect in that regard. And we'll also have yet another interlude campaign. For whatever reason, it's like the devs realized, man, we have just not been doing interludes, and they kind of actually tried to give us some here in the latter half of the year. But you guys can see we're going to get new interludes involving a Noble Phantasm interlude for Sugitani, a skill upgrade for the Trung sisters, and a skill upgrade for Zenobia there. Again, these are pretty decent buffs, and your banners will be basically the Trung sisters and Zenobia for the first one, and then Durga and Zenobia and Sugitani for the second one. So definitely an interesting campaign there, but other than, again, like the 2x super and great success chance for those involved units, it's not going to be that big of a deal unless you're somebody that just really wants to use those. December is going to roll around and we're going to get the Lost Belt 7 clear support campaign. Again, those campaigns have been very interesting, but they're mostly just designed to get you through the story. It's just going to be things like apples and mana prisms and 0 cost AP. We do get a strengthening quest here for Rasputin. So basically, this upgrade is going to make it so that his gut skill is now, at least for the additional procs of it whenever he's defeated, that RNG aspect of it is stackable with other guts. So if that triggers, it won't take the use of your other guts first. It's also going to grant himself several buffs that when guts are triggered, he's basically going to increase the party's NP damage and increase his own critical damage on defense as well. So definitely an interesting upgrade to Rasputin. It does make him a little bit more usable while strengthening the niche that he already was in. The summoning campaign is going to be basically the return of a lot of the LB7 units, including other kind of guest star units like Benny Enma. So it's definitely going to be a very interesting one for sure. And then Rasputin himself will have a devoted raid up there, but again, nothing too much to write home about unless you're after specifically him. Now from there, we should probably around this time be syncing up pretty closely with JP's actual like schedule, and this is where we're going to receive our first Christmas event on December 11th. We can pretty much know that this will tie in almost exactly with JP's dates due to the fact that there is a second part to this event kind of that's going to happen after the fact. So this is going to be your Christmas lotto coming in. You're going to get 2 new servants here, Abby Williams Santa, which is going to be your welfare, and Lohi, which is going to be a new permanent SSR AoE quick berserker. We're going to go ahead and start off with Lohi this time, just to give you guys an idea. But basically, Lohi, as we already mentioned, is an AoE quick berserker with 6 hits, increases her own NP generation rate by 20% for 3 turns activating first, deals damage to all enemies, inflicts burn to them for 1,000 over 5 turns, and increases the party's NP generation rate except for herself by 20%. From there, her overcharge effect increases her own NP damage for 3 turns by a base of 20% and increases the party's NP damage except for herself by 20%. Her skills are going to allow her to add the Darkness Battlefield and increase the party's Quick and Buster performance for 3 turns by 20% each, and grant the party evasion for 1 attack 3 turns. This does give her a lot of utility and usefulness in the regard to the fact that she's going to be able to help her allies out. And this will make her good for things like the Grand Berserker duel that's going to come in the year after this. Her second skill is going to stun all enemies for 1 turn, remove their defensive buffs, assuming they are removable, and inflict poison and curse for them for 5 turns of 2,000 damage each, as well as reducing their healing received for 5 turns. When you combine that with the burn coming off the Noble Phantasm, she basically afflicts all the basic ailments right there in her kit. Her third skill is going to charge her own NP gauge by a whopping 80% if you have this skill maxed out, which does mean that if you max out her mana loading, boom, there you go. Lohi is a self-sufficient unit, able to charge herself kind of 0 to 100% just based out of her own kit. That's definitely going to make her valuable as a nuker, as a, again, like pseudo support, and as somebody that can kind of just clear a wave for you. She's also going to charge the party's NP gauge except herself here by 20%. So this, again, feeds into that pseudo support status for her and will help her out for considerations like the Berserker Grand Duel. And she's going to reduce all enemies' critical attack chance for 3 turns by a whopping 30% at max. So that will prevent a lot of enemies from being able to crit. So definitely nice in that regard. Honestly, to me, Lohi is going to be just kind of a little bit of a quality of life for your AoE quick berserkers. For those of you guys that have been using Sinariku, she definitely is able to Black Grail loop, but she's very dependent on node structure. Lohi, just not really going to care about that sort of thing and is going to be able to do it regardless. So it's definitely a nice thing for her. And Lohi's going to be one of those units that a lot of people will be looking out to roll. That being said, Lohi is permanent. So she's one of only, I believe, 2 permanent units released this year. And she is the only 5-star who is. So that is kind of insane. And that does mean that Lohi will be pickable basically in future SSR tickets that would come beyond this, and also potentially can spook you during your rolls. So it's definitely an interesting thing that they made her permanent, and a lot of people were kind of questioning why they went ahead and did that. So she's definitely a nice pickup if you've managed to ever get lucky and manage to get her. But she is going to be one of those units that, again, I think a lot of people looking forward are going to want to acquire at least that token copy of, if not higher NP levels. Now, Abby Williams-Santa as our welfare is another interesting one. She's basically going to be very misunderstood. At least when she first came out on JP, she kind of was. And I think people kind of finally figured her out. She's a little bit of a hybrid unit, but she's not really going to be like somebody that super excels at anything. You got the triple arts deck, and she's going to kind of be a little bit of a support. You can see her Noble Phantasm is going to be a support NP. It is going to increase the value of master skills by 10% while she's on the field for 3 turns. This is really not a big deal. For instance, if you had a master skill that gave you, and master skills, by the way, are your command code skills. If you had a, mystic code, not command code. If you had a mystic code skill that gave you 10% attack up, increasing that by 10% would mean you got 1% attack up. So it's definitely a thing, but it's not worth usually taking an entire unit and using their Noble Phantasm just to acquire this effect. She will, however, increase the party's critical damage for 3 turns by up to 50% at NP5, which you should have for due to the welfare status. She'll recover the party's HP by up to 3,000 HP at NP5, and she will drain all enemies in P gauge by 1. She's also, for her overcharge effect, going to increase the party's arts performance for 3 turns by 20%. So, how is Abby supposed to work? Well, while she is supportive, a little bit, you need to think of Abby almost like a 4-star arts version of Super Orion. Maybe even Himiko in that regard. She's a little bit of a crit monster, and you'll see what I mean. So again, she's going to, with her Noble Phantasm, increase the crit damage of the entire party by 50% for 3 turns. But if we look at her active skills here, she's also going to increase the arts performance just on cooldown for herself of 30% off this skill, and then increase her own critical damage for 3 turns by 50%. That means combining with her Noble Phantasm right there, now you've already got 100% for herself. She's going to also give herself star regen of 10 per turn, which is something, again, having access to stars is a little bit rare on arts setups, so definitely a nice thing there. Her second skill is going to increase the value of master skills while she's on the field by 20% for 3 turns. This will stack with her Noble Phantasm, meaning that you can get at least like 30% right there just off of 1 NP. She's also going to increase her own NP generation rate for 3 turns by 30%. And increase her own critical star generation rate for 3 turns by up to 100%. So again, this is sort of like the Gil Caster effect there. She's going to grant herself evasion for 2 attacks 3 turns as well to give herself a little bit of survivability. And then her third skill, she's going to charge the party's NP gauge by 20%. It's not a whole lot, but it definitely can help. She'll overcharge the party's MPs by 1 stage 1 time over 3 turns. And she'll increase the max HP of child servant allies for 3 turns, which she herself should qualify as. So again, she will gain the benefit of increased health for herself there of up to 2,000, plus a crit star bomb of 20. So now you guys can see, there's a little bit of a making here of a unit that has quite a bit of crit damage, quite a bit of star generation capability, can kind of help out the party a little bit and keep them alive, still a little bit of survivability herself. But again, if you keep managing to kind of loop her and get off those Noble Phantasms, you're going to keep stacking those crit buffs and basically be able to turn her into a little bit of a monster. So she's not going to be somebody that's going to be like, say, as strong as Super Ryan, but she is kind of oddly self-sufficient and can kind of be a little bit of, again, a crit fiend there if you manage to sync up all of her buffs. So I do think that she's actually someone that's quite capable, especially with that triple arts deck there. You're going to want to focus primarily on like Mighty Chains with the arts card at the end, or again, just trying that triple arts chain off the back end of an NP. Something like that can really help her out. But yeah, I do feel like she's a unit that a lot of people probably won't use due to the carding nature of her, but she's not as bad maybe as most people thought, and she can be used a little bit as a support to some degrees. So it is what it is. I'm not going to say, again, that you have to like go through the entire lotto using her or anything like that. But yeah, Abby Williams is certainly an interesting design support that I think a lot of people overlook. Now, let's go ahead and let's take a look at the summoning campaigns here. Lohi is going to come basically with the standard event CEs. Nothing really too much to write home about other than the debuff immunity aspect of the 5-star CE here. And as we move through, the second banner is going to be Seatonai with Daiko Kuten. The third banner is going to be Reigns and Wu. And the fourth banner here is going to be the return of kind of a few units, including Hokusai, OG Abby, and then both versions of Lancelot, as well as Don Quixote and Chevalier de Eon. So certainly an interesting group of summoning campaigns, but I did mention that this is a lottery. So what's going to be in the lotto boxes for you guys is actually going to be your LB3 Bells, your LB2 Aurora Steel, your 6.5 Urn of Ashes, your basically cerebrospinal fluid, and fangs. So it'll definitely be another lotto that you guys may be, you know, curious to farm a bunch, as well as the fact that there will be an exchange ticket. And this exchange ticket will be a little bit important because not only will you have the Fruit of Longevity from LB5, the lamps as well, and the Black Beast Greased and Giant Rings, you'll also have the inclusion of the Ether Photon Convergers from Ordeal Call 1 in this list. So that's actually going to help some of you guys out that maybe haven't been farming the Ether Convergers. So definitely another nice thing and aspect to this, and each box will have at least 2 of those tickets in it. So definitely an easy way to get yourself a lot of rewards from this lotto. But if you thought that was all, guess what? On the back end of this event, pretty much Christmas Day all the way through the New Year's here, you're going to have the Space Phantasm Moon event. And what is this event? Well, it's a raid. So you're going to have more farming to do after you're farming. Admittedly, this was one of the things I wasn't a huge fan of this one. It was certainly nice of them to do this, but I have 2 major complaints, and they will absolutely carry over to NA, because unfortunately, with every event that we have ever had, this has also been the problem, because basically the NA server is run by the West Coast, which means everything operates on West Coast time. Therefore, that means that the raids will come out at times that are very terrible, probably, for just about everybody that doesn't live on the West Coast. That's a bad thing. The good news is the raids were dying super fast on JP, so the devs had to actually increase the health values multiple times of these raids. So I'm going to wager that they will either just go ahead and start out at the increased value, or that the devs on the NA side of things will increase them up. If they don't, there'll be naturally complaints there, and that'll be something that the devs will have to deal with. But again, the timing of this event's pretty piss poor, with it being during the Christmas season already to begin with. Putting raids at odd hours of the night is not something that people are going to want to do, and it just will end up being a little bit of a problem. On top of that, you're also going to be needing to roll out your lotto boxes during that time period, so it's certainly not the best. That being said, the raids basically don't last the entire time. You definitely see that, again, the raid quest got extended to January 3rd, so it should be after the turn of the year. You should have plenty of time to roll out your lotto boxes, at least kind of beforehand, and that would be my advice to you guys. But if you're still lagging on that and you're still trying to get the job done, again, it is what it is. Still, there should be, again, some nice event reward CEs in there, as well as event bonus units. But the big one that we're going to talk about here is going to be Phantasm Moon, who will be the featured limited servant of this event. Now, Phantasm Moon is another version of Arcuage. She's a what if, and I'm not going to spoil the lore there. It's something that you guys will have to go read Nasu's own words on. But basically, Phantasm Moon is going to be a single target Buster Pretender, and that's definitely an interesting one. She only has the 2 Buster cards in her deck, basically, to combine with her Noble Phantasm in order to get a triple Buster loadout, but it is an interesting deck, to say the least. So let's go ahead and let's start off with the Noble Phantasm again. She's a 5-hit single target buster NP. It's going to deal damage to one enemy and then seal their NP for 1 turn, and also increase her own extra attack performance by 50% for 1 turn. You'll definitely want to Brave Chain with Phantasm Moon if possible. The overcharge effect is going to deal extra damage to enemies that are evil alignment, so super effective, 150% base, but it scales with overcharge rate. She's going to charge her own NP gauge after the fact by a base of 20%, all the way up to a maximum of 40%. It has that saber face-like effect there, confirming that Arcuate is in fact a saber face. I'm just kidding. Charges the NP gauge of living human allies except for herself as well by an additional 20% there too. She can be used as a little bit of a support in that regard. Her first skill is going to charge the party's NP gauge by 30%. So right off the bat, just with her skill, you can get 30% party-wide charge there. And that's certainly something to consider for supportive purposes, because obviously we have units like Merlin now that will have the 30% charge. You have Koyan Sky of Dark, but now you've got Phantasm Moon kind of coming into this exact same niche as well. And again, considering that the Noble Phantasm, if you're a living human ally, is going to charge you by an additional 20%, that makes her a 50% party charger in certain cases. She's also going to overcharge the party's NPs by 1 stage, 1 time, 3 turns, and that'll include herself. She'll get the benefit of increased charge rates and things like that. It'll at least bump her up to 25% on each of those after NP refunds. Her second skill is where things get kind of spicy. So she's going to increase her own arts performance for 3 turns and bust performance for 3 turns by 30% each. And she is going to change her own extra attack to hit all enemies on 3 turns. Now, for those of you guys that don't know, whenever we get an extra attack, and any attack really that gets turned into AoE, usually what happens is they have the damage on it. You guys remember the effect of the Noble Phantasm is going to be that it will increase the extra attack performance by 50%. Yeah, it's basically just going to reverse the effect of cutting it down by half and making it almost normal carding damage. But if that weren't all, this skill will also increase her own extra attack performance for 3 turns by a whopping 100%. You're going to come out way better. Her extra attack is going to hit way harder and hit everybody. Plus, you're also going to still have the potential with append skills to further boost her extra attack performance. Does impact extra attack damage. So there's quite a bit of capability there. And then on top of that, she's going to charge her own gauge by 20%. So if you guys remember, the first one was a 30% party charge, the second one is a 20% self-charge. So that makes her a 50% charging unit. And again, these skill cooldowns are here such that you can work with this in a double Koyan Skya setup. Even with the 7-turn cooldown on the first skill, you're still going to have the 5th append as an option for reducing that. Her third skill is going to gain her critical stars, increase one ally's critical star absorption for 3 turns by a whopping 5,000%. This is enough to make every single class in the game capable of soaking stars, including things like Avenger and Berserker. And she's going to grant one ally a critical star regeneration buff for 3 turns of up to 15 stars per turn. To also increase the party's attack and critical damage for 3 turns by 20 and 30% respectively. So yeah, Phantasm Moon hits hard, charges the party a ton, and helps support the party quite a bit as well. So yes, Phantasm Moon, a very, very strong pickup, especially if you feel like you need a good single target pretender. I feel like she's going to be kind of the sort of bar to surpass at this point for quite a while, and it definitely shows with the way that they have designed her. So they pulled a sneaky one by throwing in kind of space Arcuate in there in the background of this event, but it certainly was a interesting phenomenon to do. Now, for Phantasm Moon's banner, she'll actually come with a fairly good 5-star CE. This one's going to be Blessings of the Holy Knight. It's going to be all attack scaling, and it will ignore invincibility, increase buster performance, and critical damage as well. At MLB, the buster performance up will be 5%, and the critical damage will be 20%. So quite a bit of capability there if you just need somebody that or something that has invuln pierce. But still, that's going to be the final event of the year. As I mentioned before, the raid quest will definitely be something you guys will want to look out for and farm some if you can. It is meant to, as they put it in their terms, bring in the new year. So that's certainly going to be something to look forward to. But we're not done yet, because I started this banner review basically kind of a little bit later in January is what normally happens. The initial things of January happen first before I ever get to review them. We're going to start talking about real quick here, January of 2025, aka 2027 on NA. So the New Year's campaign here that you guys are going to want to look at is, again, going to have a summoning campaign for Richard the Lionhearted. Richard's going to be your New Year's unit. He's certainly going to be interesting because again, he's going to get paired alongside a lot of these other New Year's units, but he's definitely coming into the game as a unit that has quite a bit of potential, but also is kind of coming into one of the most competitive sectors in terms of units in the entire game. What do I mean? He's going to be an AoE buster saber. And because of that, you're going to already have a ton of people that already have somebody to compete with Richard on. On top of that, Richard, frankly speaking, damage-wise, does not hold up well against some of the other units, including Lord Logress, who comes out later that year. So it's definitely an interesting thing that they've done here, where Richard comes out a little bit too early for Strange Fake, and that's why I am anticipating, and this may happen and come to pass in the time that this video gets released, but I'm anticipating that Richard's going to get some sort of Noble Phantasm interlude or some sort of increase in damage, because right now he doesn't really hang with a lot of the upper echelon of Saber units. He's not bad, to say the least. He's certainly competitive with some of them, but the units he's competitive with also probably need a buff due to the upgrades that have happened to the likes of Salter and Artoria over time. So it's definitely an interesting situation. Now, again, Richard himself, he is an AoE buster, Noble Phantasm. He's going to increase his own critical damage by 50% for 3 turns before his damage goes out. He's going to deal damage to all enemies and then inflict burn of 2,000 damage over 5 turns to them. His overcharge effect will reduce all enemies' quick arts and buster resist down by 10%, so he gets a little bit of follow-up damage no matter what cards he chooses there. His first skill is going to increase the party's attack for 3 turns by 20%, making it just a very solid charisma. It's also going to increase the party's NP generation and critical star generation rates by 20% each, and then grant himself an on-attack activate buff that will increase his own critical star generation rate by 30% for 3 turns when he attacks. This will make him a little bit of a crit star generating fiend. The issue here is, again, that Buster is so awash with crit stars in most of its compositions. We really just don't feel the need to actually care too much about that. His second skill increases his own quick arts and buster performance each 3 turns by an additional 20%, and is going to increase his own NP damage for 3 turns by 30%. It's also a targeted skill that will reduce one ally skill cooldowns by 1. The thing about this is, you're probably going to want to put this on Richard himself anyways, just to help accelerate his skills and get more firepower out of him faster. So from here, he can charge his own NP gauge on his third skill by up to 30%. This does make him a 30% charger, which means that you can pair this with mana loading and get 50% charge out of him. He's going to increase his own critical star absorption rate for buster cards and critical damage rate for buster cards for 3 turns by 500% of the absorption and 50% on the critical damage at max rank, and then gain 20 crit stars for himself. So again, critical stars will just kind of flow out of Richard. That's not going to be the issue. And if you are taking him outside of your generic farming composition, you can absolutely do some interesting stuff with him. But it does put him in an interesting spot. He doesn't really have a true niche. He's not got some sort of place that he's going to excel in damage over just about anybody else, other than maybe crit efficiency. But in the likes of that, he is competing with the likes of Mordred and other units that are also kind of maybe a little bit more in need of an upgrade. So Richard comes out, he's very hyped when he does. Everyone's excited because of Strange Fake possibly coming in the future, but now we know that Strange Fake was still basically a year away, so seems almost like Richard was released a little bit too early. But who knows, maybe they'll give him an upgrade, and maybe by the time that happens, NA will be able to roll, and you'll be thinking a lot better about Richard at that point. Now, for the rate-up craft essences that are going to appear on the New Year's campaign, Halo of the Dawn is actually pretty nice. It's going to be basically all attack scaling, have at MLB, NP gauge of 5% every turn, arts performance up of 8%, and overcharge the NP by 2 stages for 1 time. The overcharge effect is certainly a limited aspect to this, but the 5% charge per turn and 8% arts up definitely is nice on a support unit, particularly a support caster like Castoria or Tamamo, you name it. There's definitely some interesting possibilities there for not only getting them that charge per turn, but also getting them the increased card efficiency and capability. Now, it's New Year's, so we have to actually mention this, but there will be a GSSR. And this GSSR on the upcoming New Year's is going to be significant. This will be the first time that the developers will ever let us choose from 2 banners out of the 35 different pools that will be here. That's right, you won't just have 1 GSSR choice, you can choose 2. So while there won't be a Destiny order pick here, you can do the GSSR twice. Now, you will have to pay both times if you want to do it twice, but it is an interesting thing. It's going to cost you the same 15 paid quartz as it normally does. Keep in mind that does not include free quartz or bonus quartz. Both of those are treated as free. Paid quartz only for that sort of thing. But again, if you're going to spend any money on the game, usually the best time to do it is on the GSSRs. That's where you're actually going to get the best bang for your buck. Unfortunately, Richard himself, who is a new unit, Space Ereshkigal and Draco as the 2 beast units will not be available in this GSSR. That's just been how they've been rolling with the beast units, unfortunately. So it just is what it is. But you guys can see there's quite a bit of capability. Things are going to be split up in a way that should be pretty interesting, because you're going to obviously have female units and male units, each with their own pools. Obviously, there'll be some gender neutral people, but then you're going to have them grouped by their card type effectively. So it's definitely an interesting thing to see how they do this. This will allow you to have pretty small pools and have some pretty awesome capabilities here for trying to isolate good units. That means that several of these pools will be very good for you guys to choose. I'm not going to render judgment on them just yet, because again, this is pretty far away in the future. And by the time we get to this, I'll probably be making a video on it myself. So that will be your GSSRs there. And we've got one last thing to kind of mention here, and that's going to be very quickly in January. You will also have the Evocation Festival for the New Year's campaign. This one is going to be basically Evo Fest Part 9, and it's going to be significant because you're going to have the ability to finally re-get all of the Valkyrie Assassin Welfare units, as well as, again, Utsumi Eris and her AoE Arts Lancer capacity. And then finally, last but not least, Kichi Hogan, who is also another quick AoE looping assassin. So definitely interesting lineup there. But again, the Valkyries are going to be the star of this one. You're absolutely going to want to pick them up if you don't already have them. And it will also be the time that you will finally be able to acquire any of the missing Valkyries that you didn't get the first time around. The banner for this will be including Tyra no Kagekiyo and Brynhildr alongside Voyager and Kijo Koyo. So definitely an interesting one there. And there will also be a pretty interesting CE alongside the Kagekiyo raid up, which is going to be basically the quick arts and buster up with overcharge, all attack scaling CE. No starting charge there. Also, the Brynhildr rate up will also have another one that's basically all attack scaling with Twin Tail called, or sorry, that's going to have Buster Performance, critical damage, and overcharge as well. And then last but not least, the Voyager rate up will have one called Mission Start. And this one will be the one that I think a lot of people will have interest in, simply because at MLB, not only will it be all attack scaling, it'll have 50% charge, it'll have crit damage, arts, and quick performance up of 10% each. So certainly a nice effect to have on a CE for you guys. But again, that's where I feel like we will end the banner review. I just kind of wanted to quickly address some of the stuff that happens there really quick. But that next year will be a very interesting one because you'll start getting the grand duels. You'll start headed towards the finale for part 2. And certainly there will be a whole lot of farming opportunities that next year. So use this year to get the units that you guys need, because next year you're going to get a banner for literally everyone multiple times. And it's going to make it very difficult to try to kind of get things set up because your quartz is going to be strained from all of the options available to you. So plot out your roles. Make sure you guys are, again, doing your due diligence on which units you want, which units you feel like you need. And remember, you don't have to roll any unit in this game. You can beat this game with just about anybody. Thank you guys for watching. Thank you guys for all the support. If you haven't ever gotten on Discord or you haven't subscribed to YouTube, make sure you guys do so. I appreciate y'all. I'll see you guys later.